Give me just like 2 minutes. I just have to let my family know or whatever what's going on because I was gonna watch a movie with them tonight. So give me 1 second.
That's that's upsetting.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? No, yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Oh my goodness. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Bro, I like was doing a nitro giveaway to see if somebody would like tell me if they could hear me. Like the first person to say yes would have gotten nitro, but none of you guys
Yes.
crazy.
I'm joking. Okay, are we ready?
Yeah,
And just
salam
to
alaikum
clarify,
to the Muslims, by the way.
assalamu alaikum to the Muslims and to the Christians and whatever other faith. I hope you guys are doing well. Just to clarify, do we have the format typed out?
So
Yes, I believe that he said it's 18 minutes for intros, correct?
I said
Um,
18 minutes. Bus is saying 15 minutes. Let's do 17 minutes, Bus. Everybody knows like I speak fast and I don't want to
we meet in the
speak too
middle and do
fast for it to get on.
17.
Let's do
You're muted, sir.
All right, should be good. So,
Yeah.
Bless, are you okay with 17? Meeting in the middle from 18 and 15?
Yeah, I guess. If Abdulazeez can go first, since the debate proposition was brought to him.
Yeah, that's fine.
Uh,
I'll go first.
all right, so we agree with 17 minutes for intros. We're good?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after that, we have what? Just trying to make sure I have it correctly. 17. What was the next one?
I think it was 15-minute rebuttals.
Mm.
All
Two
right.
10-minute rebuttals. Two
there
10
was
minute.
Oh,
a
two tens.
yeah, it was the opening, and then there was like a 10 minute kind of rebuttal where like we talk about the opening, and then afterwards we go into cross examination. There's a closing period, like a
We
pre.
can do
How
we can do
long does
this.
the process
We
take?
can do two 10-minute rebuttals, right? Or we can do one 15-minute rebuttals and then go into the interrogation segment for 15 minutes.
I
Also,
just
I'll
need
do
to.
is someone asked. Sorry, real quick. Someone asked you to cam up. That's all. I have to.
Is anyone else? Oh, camming is not allowed.
No. Someone requested for Abdulazeez to cam
Too
up
much
since you have your camera on.
too much fitna.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay, cross examinations, how much time?
It was 15, right?
Yeah.
It was one for each side, 15 minutes. And
Yes.
then what were the closings?
Closings were each 5 minutes, I believe.
Yeah,
Alright.
it's just
You two can correct me if I'm wrong.
And then would you guys do Q&A or?
We can
Okay.
do a little Q&A if anyone's interested.
Alright,
I
sure.
think some people will be. I know Cora and I might have some
Hell
questions.
yeah. Alright.
Just
All
curious,
right.
is anyone recording this?
Yes, we have.
yes, no part is.
You mind
Yeah,
sending me the recording afterwards?
They'll do it. They'll
inshallah.
do it.
Yeah, we'll post it
By all
on the.
means.
Yeah.
No, I just want the recording. Like, I can send you an email or something if that's what it takes. I just want the recording as a.
We'll get
We
it.
If you'd like,
We'll
you
get
can
it.
just put it in a Google Drive if that works, whatever is
Yeah,
easiest.
that works perfect.
All right.
All right, got my music going. I think I'm ready.
Cora, are you gonna go for time or shall I?
Abdulazeez goes first. Do you want a timer? Because I have it ready.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, 1 second. And Abdulazeez, you can just start whenever you're ready.
Okay. So in this debate, we're going to go over one of the most common claims that the Christians make, that it was unanimously agreed upon that Jesus Christ was of crucifix on Pontius Pilate in the first, second, and third centuries, and so on and so forth, until the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came. This killing of Christ, the Christians would claim, would be done by the Jews or the Romans, depending on if you read Paul's writings or the Gospels. They also like to claim that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was an innovator for saying that Jesus wasn't killed, and I will refute them on this, and we'll show that how this belief is founded in the first century with the disciples and with the early Christians in the early congregations. Okay, Christians heavily rely on the event of the crucifix to have faith in their soteriology, their doctrine doctrine of salvation, which Paul derives from the crucifix. Paul says in Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. Right? And the Quran frees Jesus from Paul's slander, where he says he was made a curse, like it does all the rest of the prophets within the Old Testament, within the Quran. Right here we have in Surah Al-Maryam, chapter 19, verse 30 through 31, Jesus declared, I'm truly a servant of Allah. He has destined me to be given the scripture and to be a prophet. He has made me a blessing wherever I go and bid me to establish prayer and give zakat as long as I live. So we know Jesus is a blessing wherever he goes, according to the Quran, and he was made a curse within the Bible, right? Also, Paul states in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 3 and 4 and verse 14, the importance of the crucifixion, right? How important this is for his theology, for his Christology, and for his soteriology. He says, for I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. He was buried and he was raised from the dead on the third day, just as the scriptures said, even though funnily enough, he doesn't cite any scriptures for this, right? And then in verse 14, he says, and if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless. So if Christ has not been raised from the grave, he didn't die and it wasn't raised from the grave, our preaching is useless, right? So we can see that this is a central core belief to Christianity and their doctrine. And we see Jesus being killed on the cross is what Paul is the first one historically to ever profess Jesus being crucified, and he makes it the heart of his writings, right? This debate is going to be about the historicity of the crucifix and the early attestation of what actually happened to Jesus, and we will view this from a theological perspective while looking at scripture, i.e. doing an internal critique, and we will also see the attestation external to the New Testament and if it's in line with it. I will show the truthfulness in the Quranic narrative, and I will ruin the Christian position, and I'll go over the verse from the Quran, chapter 4, Surah Nisa, verse 157. وقولهم إن قتلنا المسيح عيسى بن مريم رسول الله وما قتلوه وما سلبوه ولكن شبه لهم وإن الذين اختلفوه فيه لفي شك من ما لهم بهم من علم إلا طبار الظن وما قتلوه يقينا برفع الله إليه وكان الله عزيزا حكيما. So the Quran tells us that the early people had ikhtilaf, they had difference of opinion, they had conjecture. I'm going to prove that they had conjecture, and I'm going to prove the Islamic belief within the first century, right? Then we're told they had shak, they had doubt, right? That they had no ilm. The Quran says they also had no ilm, that they didn't have proper knowledge or reliable knowledge or information pertaining to what actually happened on the crucifix, right? And last, we're told that they were following dhan, conjecture, hearsay, right? And we see this historically in the first century, second century, and third century, exactly pristine verse telling us about the historicity of the crucifix, right? So I'm going to continue, right? So I'm just going to make the bold claim. There's zero non-Christian witnesses to the crucifixion in form of attestation to the events in the first century and early second century from historians and writers contemporary to that time. He will likely bring up Cornelius Tacitus, Flavius Josephus, Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, Marabar Serapion, Thales, Lucian, Celsus, and rabbinic sources to prove that Jesus was killed. And I'll deal with these with ease using his own scholarship, right? So let's go over the Testimonium Flavinium. Right here, we're going to go over one of the leading experts on the Flavius Josephus, where he mentions in his book, New Perspectives on Jewish-Christian Relations, right here, the scholar is Ilavisha, Carla Buck, and Jacob J. Schachter. So right here, and page, right here he goes over. In my Josephus and Modern Scholarship, 1937 through 1980, I mentioned 87 articles discussing this passage for the period 1937 to 1980, the overwhelming majority of which question these paragraphs' authenticity in whole or in part. Right, the first person to ever mention this is Eusebius. Right, the Testimony of Flavian. First person ever mentioned is Eusebius in the 4th century. There were 8 Christian writers before Eusebius who referenced from Josephus without mentioning the Testimonium. Right, and Origen. In fact, Origen cited 5 passages from the same chapter without mentioning this passage. I'm going to reach page 14. Louis H. Feldman, he goes over this. He says, the first person among writers whose work have survived to quote the Testimonium Flavinium is the early 4th century church father Eusebius, who makes use of this source in 3 of his works, Demonstratio Evangelica, Historia Ecclesiastica, and Theophania. There are slightly different wordings in these 3 citations, leading to the question of whether Eusebius himself may have altered the exact formulation of the text, right? So let's go on page 15 of his book. Nevertheless, there are 8 Christian writers who lived before Eusebius and who mention Josephus yet make no reference to the Testimonium in their works. Theophilus of Antioch, Minucius, Felix, Julius, Africanus, Hippolytus, Origen, Methodius, and Pseudo-Stadios, and Pseudo-Justin. The fact is, if it isn't in fact that no ante-Nicene Christian is known to have used Josephus' works and apologies directed to Jews is certainly surprising in view of the charge, as seen in the dialogue with Trypho, that Jesus never lived, and in view of the eagerness of Christians to convert Jews, right? So we can go even after Eusebius. 4 Christian writers reference the passages from Josephus, but none mention the Flavionium Testimonium crucifixion passage, and moreover, the extant manuscripts come not before before the 11th century, right? And I'm going to read page 17 from his book. He says, even after Eusebius, we find 4 Christian writers in the 5th century who know the works of Josephus, but do not cite the testimonium. And then he goes over the scholars or goes over the historians and the church fathers. None of them mention it, right? And then the testimonium Flavinium, the manuscripts coming for them are coming from the 11th century, right? And here's another popular Christian apologist. His name is Dr. Jonathan McClatchy. Bless is probably familiar with him. He says, yes, I agree that the sources such as the testimonium Flavinium are almost useless in terms of evidential value. However, Josephus and other ancient sources are helpful in other ways or useful in other ways, right? So we can go to E.P. Sanders, historical figure of Jesus. He says, Jesus was mentioned in Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews. Josephus, as we saw above, was born in 37 CE, just a few years after Jesus' death, and he wrote the Antiquities in the 90s. The Jewish historian certainly knew something about Jesus, and there's a paragraph of him in the Antiquities. But Josephus' works were preserved by Christian scribes who could not resist the temptation to revise the text and thus make Josephus proclaim that Jesus was the Messiah, that he taught the truth, and after this death that he was restored to life, failing a fluke discovery. We shall never know what Josephus actually wrote. He was not a convert to Christianity, and he did not really think that Jesus was the Messiah. Right? So we'll never know because the scripture has been undergone so much corruption. Okay, next we can go to Tacitus. We can go to Robert E. Van Vroest in his book Jesus Outside the New Testament. We can go to page 52 where he says the most likely source of Tacitus's information about Christ is Tacitus' own dealings with Christians, directly or indirectly, right? So he's not going over records. He's not going over the Greco-Roman records pertaining to who was actually crucified. He's just hearing this on a secondhand account. It's not a primary source, right? So secondly, Tacitus did not even mention the crucifixion. All he did was mock the Christians for worshiping a God who got the ultimate punishment. And scholars say that this ultimate punishment, this terminology they use, can be interpreted in many different ways. Let's go to Gunnar Samuelson and Crucifixion and Antiquity, right here, page 166. He says, nothing in the text suggests that Tacitus connects the punishment supplicio of Jesus with the attaching to crucibis ad fixi of the Christians. The problem is, however, that Tacitus does not offer any negative or strengthening attribute to the noun in the quoted text above. It is just referred to as a punishment. On the other hand, when he describes the punishment of the Jews under Quadratus in Annals 1254 and mentions a capital punishment, he uses there a different and stronger terminology, capite poenas, the label ultimate punishment, novisimpa exempla. At the end of the text appears to cover not only the attachment to crucis, but also the fate of being killed by dogs, as well as being burnt in Nero's garden. So Tacitus isn't even mentioning the crucifixion. He's not even mentioning the punishment of the crucifixion. He's just saying ultimate punishment. Scholars say it can be interpreted in many different ways, either by being killed by dogs, as well as being burnt in Nero's garden. So there's too much conjecture for this to be like a solid, accurate testimony to Jesus' crucifixion. Okay. Thirdly, the extant manuscripts of Tacitus come from the 9th and the 11th century. Here's the New Testament documents by F.F. Bruce. He says, of the 14 books of the histories of Tacitus, only 4.5 survive. Of the 16 books of his annals, 10 survive in full and 2 in part. The text of these extant portions of his 2 great historical works depends entirely on 2 manuscripts, one of the 9th century and one of the 11th. So those writings are coming much later on, okay? So right here, we can go over the Resurrection of Jesus by Michael R. Lacona, where he eliminates Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, Marabar Serapion, Thales, Lucian, Celsus, and rabbinic sources, and he says they're all not useful. And this would be a lot of reading, so if he wants to go into every single one of these guys one-on-one, we can go do it in the rebuttal, or we can do it whenever we're in Q&A for one another, okay? So what else could we go over? All right, we can go over the Gospels and like the historical inaccuracies within them pertaining to like Matthew inserting in Matthew chapter 27 verse 51 through 53 the walking dead saints that come and arise from the ground when the curtain is split, when the temple is split in two, and all the saints start walking up in the holy city. Right? Christian scholars like Michael Lacona admits that this is a strange report and special effects in his book, The Resurrection of Jesus, at page 530 and page 552, where he talks about this. William Lane Craig says, probably only a very few conservative scholars would treat the story as historical, right? Mark doesn't mention it. John doesn't mention it. Luke doesn't mention it. When Paul is preaching to the Gentiles in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 12, he doesn't mention it. He says he's trying to convince them that resurrection is true, And he doesn't bring up the saints resurrecting. He only brings up Jesus' resurrection when he says, but if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? So if there was a bunch of walking dead saints around, everyone would have been believing the idea of resurrection, right? But this is obviously, most scholars are going to say that this is some sort of mythology that's been introduced into the Gospels, and I can make a strong argument that comes from the holiday Anathesteria about the walking dead, right? When Julius Caesar was assassinated, okay? So what else could we go over? We can easily ruin Mark. Mark isn't the most reliable source, right? Here's the good news according to the Mark, Edward Schweizer. He says, we do not know who the author was. Conceivable that Mark was his real name. The superscriptions of the biblical books were not added until the 2nd century, but it was necessary, at least orally, to distinguish between the Gospels as soon as it was more than one, if the title had been given to a latter time when the real author was not known. And they go over that he doesn't know the geography of Palestine, and how he's obviously an interpreter of Peter, so he's in a first-hand witness to pertaining to what actually happened in Jesus' life, right? The Gospels of John, the Gospel of Mark is dating around 70 to 80, Gospels of Matthew and Luke 85 to 95 around this time. And Gospel of John right here, the Gospel of John the Gospel according to John, this is Andrew T. Lincoln, where he says, if the fourth Gospel shows knowledge, and this is in his book, the Gospel according to John, St. John, page 18, he says, if the fourth Gospel shows knowledge of not only the synoptic tradition, but also, on some occasions, of material that is thought to be the editorial work of the synoptic evangelist, see the discussion under the relation of to the synoptic Gospels, then this also suggests an earlier date of around 85 CE. The best guess of most scholars, then, is that the Gospel in its final form was completed and began to be circulated at some time between 90 and 110 CE, and I'm going to completely get to folding whenever we see how John is a revisionist and how John corrects all of these little doubts that these Christians would have had in the first century, where he tampers with the crucifixion narrative and he changes things for theological benefit and to refute doubts that these early Christians would have been having. Okay, now we can go to the New Testament story by Ben Witherington, where he goes over the Gospel of Matthew. He says, this Gospel is a composite of several known sources, Gospel of Matthew, including 95% of Mark, a wide range of Q material, and some material unique to Matthew called special M, such as what we find in the birth narratives. It may be appropriately be asked why one of the original 12 disciples who was an eyewitness of the life of Jesus would need to be so profoundly dependent on a gospel written by a non-eyewitness, namely Mark. And then it says, since Matthew's gospel is so clearly dependent on Mark, it must then have been written later than Mark's gospel, perhaps sometime in the 70s or 80s. This gospel is, however, different in numerous ways from Mark's gospel, although it fits a description of being an ancient biography, right? And now we can read the New Testament by Modern English by J.B. Phillips, right? He says, early tradition ascribed to this gospel to the Apostle Matthew, but early tradition ascribed this gospel to the Apostle Matthew, but scholars nowadays almost all reject this view. The author, whom we still can conveniently call Matthew, has plainly drawn on the mysterious Q, which may have been used in a collection of oral traditions. He has used Mark's gospel freely, though he has rearranged the order of events and has in several instances used different words for what is plainly the same story, right? So when it comes to these gospels, they're anonymously attributed to these quote-unquote disciples or people who are contemporary to the disciples. We have no way of independently verifying who wrote what, and we have them copying off of one another, and we have them revising and looking at the scriptures as has been written previously, and them correcting them and editing it as they please. And these gospels weren't even named until the 2nd century and later on. And the first person we ever have to attest to these 4 gospels being Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John is Irenaeus of Lyons around the year 180, right? If he's going to go to Papias, I'll completely ruin and fold Papias. Papias is so unreliable. He quotes apocryphal stories like from the Apocalypse of Baruch, and scholars all uniformly reject him. Bar Ehrman says this in his book, Jesus Interrupted. Who else says this? Scholars like Charles H. Wright and from Oxford University, he says Papias is most unreliable. The saying of the Lord found in Papias about the future fertility of the earth is apocryphal and is found in the
5
Apocalypse of Baruch.
minutes.
Okay, and it's found in the Apocalypse of Baruch, which is probably the 1st century after Christ. And in that book, in such a manner, is to prove the idea as far earlier. See Professor Charles, Apocalypse of Baruch, right? Papias' account of the death of Judas contradicts that in the Gospels and Acts, right? So even we see in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verse 5 through 8, we see Judas, he died by hanging himself, and it was labeled as a suicide. And did he return the money or did he keep it? He returned it to the priest. And who actually bought the field? It was a temple priest, right? And then the book of Acts, it says he fell head first and burst open, and it says he kept the money for himself, or kept the money for himself, and it said Judas is the one who brought the field. So if they can even give us a reliable story, and there's conjecture between a church father and between the book of Acts that's attributed to Luke, and between the Gospel of Matthew that's attributed to Matthew, anonymously attributed to Matthew, then how are we supposed to take any sort of independent attestation pertaining to what actually happened in Jesus' life, right? So Papias, unreliable. Irenaeus is the first one to quote these Gospels, right? It's a horrid way of looking at history pertaining to that what actually happened in Jesus' life, right? So we're going to go over the sources that all denied the crucifix within the 1st century, within the 2nd century, within the 3rd century, the people who had apostolic succession. So I'm going to go over this book, Found Christianities, by M. David Litwa, where he goes over the Basilidians. And he says, the Basilidians had apostolic succession running through Glossius to Peter to Matthias to Jesus, right? And they claim that Simon of Cyrene was the one who was crucified. So they have apostolic succession. They were arguing within the 2nd century against Irenaeus of Lyons. And Irenaeus of Lyons quotes their gospel, and he says, he, Christ, appeared on earth as a man and performed miracles. Thus he himself did not suffer. Rather, a certain man, Simon of Cyrene, was compelled to carry his cross for him. It was the he, Simon, who was ignorantly and erroneously crucified, being transfigured by him, so that he, Simon, might be thought to be Jesus. Moreover, Jesus assumed the form of Simon and stood by laughing at him. And he says they even quote Psalms 2, and they use it messianically when the archons conspire against the Lord and his anointed, and he who sits in the heaven laughs. And they attribute this to Jesus and say they're using messianic prophecies. They have apostolic succession, and they're saying Jesus ascended into the heavens. So they're heretics according to me. They're Docetists, right? But when it comes to the conjecture, when it comes to all these people with all these different theories pertaining to what actually happened to Jesus. Some saying Simon of Cyrene was crucified. Some saying Judas of Iscariot was crucified. Some saying Jesus Barabbas. Even Raymond Brown says some may have been saying that Jesus Barabbas, Jesus son of Abba, might have been crucified. This is why John changes the label on top of the cross and says Jesus of Nazareth instead of Jesus King of the Jews, so there wouldn't be any speculation or there wouldn't be any doubts going around, right? But when it comes to this, yeah, we have conjecture galore, conjecture galore. I'm going to be going over in my rebuttal Ignatius of Antioch and his congregation, how he's multiple Jewish Christians, multiple provinces of Jewish Christians who are all uniformly denying the crucifix. And they make multiple arguments. They say it's not in our original documents, Ignatius. The crucifixion, the death, and the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus is not in our gospel. So why would we believe in it? Why would we believe in it? Right? This in the letter to Philadelphians, chapter 8. In the letter to Trallians, chapter 10, Ignatius is saying there's people who say that Jesus only appeared to have suffered. And he says they only seem to be Christians. And he says in the letter to Cimmerian, same thing that he says in the letter to the Trallians. So we have Ignatius who's dealing with all these cities, right? And he's dealing with all these Christian beliefs that would have been there well solidified within the first century. These beliefs didn't just pop up in the year 100. These were amongst 4 different cities. And the letter to Magnesians, he talks about Jewish Christians who left and abandoned their customs and traditions and abandoned the Sabbath. And now they've come to a new way of life. And he's talking about they've now come to Paulinian Christianity and they reject, some of them deny Jesus' death. So we're going to be going over these letters. I will show how this is easily, like the Islamic belief is easily solidified there within the first century. How much time do I have left? Okay, so no one said anything. Okay, so anyways, we're gonna go over the conjecture that these people had. We're gonna go over all the sources.
1:30.
Beautiful,
Sorry.
beautiful. We're gonna go. All good, all good. We're gonna go over all the sources that deny the crucifix in the 1st and the 2nd century, and we're gonna show it's not a historical fact. It's not a historical fact that Jesus would have been crucified. This whole idea of Yahweh coming down in the flesh and passing through a birth canal, and then later on going through his ministry, and then dying and being whipped and lashed and tortured and disfigured and dishonored by his own creation to forgive his creation is not something that you'll find in the Old Testament. This is a completely innovative view taken from the pagans, like what Justin Martyr says in his First Apology, chapter 21. He says, he says, the Logos of God. When we say that the Logos of God, right, became and was born. Without any sexual union, and then mainly our teacher Jesus Christ, and he died and he resurrected and he ascended into the heavens. We found nothing new or different from what you pagans believe regarding the sons of Jupiter. All right, so this is what he says. So this idea of some sort of mythological man, God, savior who comes down, dies for the
30
sins of humanity,
seconds.
and introduces all of these customs and traditions and holidays. This is that of Mithras, that is that of Attis, that is that of Dionysus, that is that of the Iliads of Homer when they write about Hector. All of this like divine man coming and redeeming his people and being torn to pieces or being killed or being tortured and then dying and then resurrecting and ascending back into the heavens is all paganistic. It doesn't come. It's not solidified within Abrahamics. I dare him to bring me any messianic prophecy that he would challenge me on. Isaiah 53, Psalms 22. I can make super good arguments against this as not pertaining to Jesus. And I can bring my own messianic prophecies that talk about Jesus being saved, delivered, honored, rescued, so on and so forth.
All right. Blessed. You good over there?
Oh yeah, I'm fantastic.
Okay.
I'm better than good.
We
You have
can
no
tell.
idea. I'm chilling. I'm feeling like a villain. Thank
Hell,
you
you're
for
having
asking.
a good time over there, buddy.
I'm having a blessed time. But it doesn't allow me to share my screen.
Good
I
one,
need
good one.
permissions for that. Is that okay? I have a
Wait, are
presentation.
Permissions to
them
stream, I
tomorrow?
got you. I
I
got you.
appreciate
Hold
it. Thank
on.
you. I'm gonna have to leave and join back real quick because it doesn't operate. So when you give it to me, let me know and I'll join back.
By the time you leave and join back, you should have it. And let me tag you in the side chat.
It's 18 minutes, correct? Just make sure.
Yep.
Perfect. I got
It's
my own
17.
17. Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
You both agreed on the middle part or 17. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yep, he raised it to 15. He raised from 15 to 17, and I said we can do from 10 to 15 for cross examination, so it worked perfect. Awesome. I was just making sure because I have my own little timer here with yours. So I can sure.
All right. You should be good to go.
Okay, it's not popping up, so let me join back.
No worries. Among all the devices, because I'm using my stuff for homework right now. Like I'm doing chem.
iPad, bruh.
Doing chem on one side, I'm doing the debate on the iPad, and then my phone is being used. I literally just had a phone call. So you guys,
It's still not popping up for me.
let's try this.
I mean, I can
Oh,
make a
that's
screen.
because
I
you're
can make
above.
a screenshot from my phone and send it to you on Discord so you can see. I'm not lying. It was
No,
a
no,
big
no.
X.
I believe you. I believe you. And I know the reason why.
Okay.
You want to try one more time for me?
Sure, of course.
Can somebody bring him back up, please?
I got you.
Nope, still same thing. It's still blacked out.
Let's see what the issue is here.
Oh my god, y'all gave me every frickin' possible role.
Only like the media ones that
Right.
people can only have.
While y'all do that, I'm gonna take another shot of alcohol.
Crazy.
Well,
No,
Abdulazeez is in for it, so.
That's
guys,
crazy.
we don't endorse
We do not
nor do
permit
we.
alcohol nor drug use on this live or this
Not live.
recording
The
nor
stage.
this stage for anybody.
Bro's drinking Kool-Aid.
Especially since we have younger individuals in the audience that are learning from this.
Yeah, Ikhwa, please do not do drugs nor
Oh,
drink
yeah.
alcohol.
No, I absolutely agree. And when the audience, don't do drugs.
Bro, the baby pink Stanley Cup, that's insane.
Bro thinks
Yeah, that
Jesus'
is-
blood is gonna be like a power-up.
No,
Yo,
I
chill,
agree.
chill,
Not a good thing to do.
chill. All right. Bless. Let's see if this worked. If not, my technological skills are lacking. He did not have to leave. He just had to tell me if it worked.
It worked. Oh no, it disappeared.
It worked and disappeared.
Yeah, here. I'll send you a screenshot so you can see I'm not bullshitting here. Because I don't want people to think I'm lying here on this. I'm legit.
You're not putting on the camera. You're not putting on the camera.
Here. No, I got my Discord connected. I'm screen sharing. I'm gonna send the photo in the chat that I just sent. Because something's going up, and I've got a presentation here to give on the topic. That's why. Here. I'll send it in the chat. Did that work?
Yeah, we can see it now.
No.
All right. Well, there we go. Perfect. All right. I'll get my timer set. Okay. Do I just go?
Give me
when I
2
start?
seconds.
Yep. I'll let you know when I say start. That'll be when I go. Sound good?
Yeah, and we agreed for 17, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
All right, sounds good. Start when you're ready.
Start. Okay. Perfect. Something to make sure real quick. Nothing against Abdulazeez. He is a fast-talking person. There's quite a few things to go over. This presumed presentation will go over quite a few things, but there's some other things I'll have to go over throughout the presentation. The reason for me not including the text is to save time. I've recommended anyone to read these texts in their free time to see the full understanding. I linked these texts so you can see the quotes of them throughout. I've not touched any apostolic fathers, nor did I touch Celsus, preserved by Eusebius, because during this time I didn't find a good source to decipher between Eusebius and Celsus's remarks, but I have now. This could be something we can further talk about, but Celsus isn't really needed here. There are many Christian sources and non-evidence Christians that have told Jesus being crucified as historical, but given the evidence, people like Richard Carey and others like David Fitzgerald have convinced a good section of the laymen who don't say this properly that Jesus wasn't crucified or even didn't exist. But here, particularly like Surah 157, we'll do with Jesus' crucifixion. So, 7 topics. What do the Gospels entail? What is crucifixion? Events surrounding Jesus' crucifixion, his crucifixion according to the Gospels of Paul, the reasons for it, and in extra biblical sources and scholars with different backgrounds to the same point. So, Burridge is a classicist and he's an internationally respected scholar. And after writing his thesis on Greco-Roman biography, trying to disprove Charles Talbert's thesis and convince him on the position that the Gospels are of Greco-Roman biography. And so Graham Stanton notes that I do not think it's possible now to deny the Gospels as a subset of the broad genre of the literary genre of lives, that is, of biographies. Charles Talbert writes about Burridge that this volume ought to end any legitimate denials of the canonical Gospel's biographical character, and is considered that the majority is not of a consensus position that the Gospels are, excluding Acts, a historiography, not including the bio, but drop into a bigger portion of history. So the four forms that we get is that the events in the text could be segmented and moved in order to highlight the intensified theme. In order to do a statement, the overall structure of a biography is consistent with the birth, the public life, and the death. Ancient biographies would consist between 10 or 20,000 words, which would be around the same time as the Gospels, and also with a genealogy of the person. Also, they wrote very few things about the person. If you look at Lucian's Life of Demon Acts to John, they both consist of a concept of the idea not writing about everything of one's character. There are very few things, of which many I've mentioned, but they will suffice to give my reader a notion of the sort of man Demon Acts was. There are many other things which Jesus did, were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. This is a complex topic regarding the Gospels as biography, but it's important that it connects historical intentionality. And so if somebody wants to argue against historical intentionality, they have to show that, because, there's no book in antiquity that is infallible on its own merit. This isn't a conversation about Christianity. This is a conversation about if Jesus was crucified. Gospels as biography. So as biography, they have a theme. They care about the death and told in tribute of them, moral philosophy and teachings. Scholar Craig Keener notes that the central difference between biography and history is that the former focused on a single letter, whereas the latter include a broader range of events. David Yoon also shows that it was still firmly rooted in historical fact rather than literary fiction. So while the evangelists were essentially concerned with an important theological agenda, the very fact that they chose to adapt Greco-Roman biographical conventions to tell the story of Jesus indicated they were essentially concerned to communicate what actually happened. Since biographies, especially during the living memories of those of the one writing, shows that they were considered more accurate and less fantastical than those making things up. That was a forbidden rule. Since the Gospels are within the lifetimes of ones within the document of the witnesses in the Gospels give more credence than those written centuries later. Keener also notes those of Suetonius' Otho, where we find over 48 points of agreement with Tacitus, where we see with the Gospels and the Synoptics are agreeing with Jesus on different points. We can compare with Suetonius and Tacitus with Otho on agreements of points when it comes to reliability of eyewitness testimony of those working off the last ones surviving off a claim. Now, since Jesus' crucifixion is centered around the Gospels and genre matters much, it's more credence it's not made up. This topic would devote much to research, so the small points I put down is only a fraction of the conversation. But again, there's other things like Burridge and Keener's Christobiography. You can conclude on why they are considered that genre of historical intentionality. Crucifixion was for a deterrent value. The main reason was it was not to forbid the cruelty that was. You know what? I've got 11 minutes and this doesn't seem proper the way I'm doing this, honestly. I'm going to change this up. So, I got 11 minutes. Here's the reason why Christ was crucified. The Gospels are genre, is Greco-Roman biography. Any claims I make here from now on, Abdulazeez, you can question me on it. You ask me for my source. Because what I've realized, we're playing a game of sources. For example, you tried to levy that, just to give a quick example, that John McAlatchy argues against James Charlesworth, and Charlesworth is my own bringing into it, regarding Tacitus' reliability, because McAlatchy says we can't use Tacitus as an authentic source. But unfortunate to McAlatchy doesn't have a PhD or an understanding of how ancient history operates outside of the New Testament. And if he did, he'd understand with Charlesworth that, like, for example, Tacitus and others are used as these sources for Greco-Roman biographical conventions. So what you're arguing is the scholar's opinion against another. And to decipher that is we have to deal with how history operates and the facts within that. So we can actually go through that a little bit. So when it comes to Christ's crucifixion, one of the things we see with the parallel of the Gospels, and the Gospels are Greco-Roman biography and intention, is they show a connection of who Christ was and who he is to be. The Gospels, regardless if you want to hold that they are not the biographical genre or authorship of who they are, doesn't matter. They're written within chronological and the timeline and the geographical position of writing within the living witnesses of the people that write. Luke 1:1 presents this when he says he compiles a narrative among things that have been taught among us. And no one within their, right would argue against that. Even Arthur Darby Knock noted, a very well-known classicist that was not a Christian, pointed out that this has remnants to eyewitness testimony throughout Acts. And so when we see these comparables, we see that Jesus being scourged and stripped by Roman soldiers is not considered unusual. Jesus being mocked and ridiculed as a king, like you mentioned with John earlier, as I mentioned, to change the format wouldn't make much sense either. Jesus nailed to a cross by his hands and feet, while implied, but not explicitly stated, is consistent with Roman procedures of crucifixion. Him being crucified by two others is consistent with crimes that would lead to crucifixion. And also Jesus to Johanan, who is the archaeological find of a crucifixion where they found, obviously, metal rods in his feet, where it's consistent with Roman procedure. So with the Gospels, all four Gospels, as you're going to probably attack, because I got a feeling this conversation is going to be more not in the opening, but how we do in the cross-examination, is from Mark to John, they both attest to the crucifixion. Both from Ehrman to others agree with this to the majority view. Even others that you say agree with certain sources like Tacitus, like you said Lacona or something, disagree with Tacitus or Suetonius and all of them. He nevertheless agrees with the crucifixion. And so I feel like you're doing something called a la carding or Frankensteining a position where you're taking particular like cornerstone markers of what scholars say, like particular parts, you're taking it and Frankenstein an argument together without actually taking in their methodology and how they got to that claim to begin with. If you did that, you realize their methodologies are inconsistent. But Paul's undisputed Pauline letters, for example, we can see this is consistent throughout. And reasons for crucifixion we can see are obvious. The chief priests as the main instigators between the Jews and the Romans for Jesus' arrest. We can see this with the high priest and Pontius Pilate throughout. And even there are chief priests indirectly that are found trying to catch Jesus to get him in what are called blasphemy charges. Because if you look at his trial, Christ was not crucified because he claimed to be the Messiah. It's not a blasphemous charge. It's what he claimed to be God, and he's considered on the right clouds of the Father of heaven. That's what makes it a blasphemy charge. And so even Brown notes says that Jesus is being accused or arrogantly claiming for himself what belongs to God, and that thus insulting of God. And then people could be put to death for insulting the God of Israel, though arrogance, as well as putting for the naming of that name. And this is obviously Brown, who's quite a critical scholar. So you mentioned a few things. I have 6 minutes, about 7 minutes to wrap up with Josephus and Tacitus. So the alleged doctor version of Josephus' Antiquities is that there was a wise man. It'd be lawful to call him a man, for he is a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as he receives the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him many, both Jews and among the Gentiles. He was a Christ. And when Pilate, as a suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at first did not forsake him. For he appeared to him alive the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold him, and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named after him, not extinct to this day, that's kind of the conversation you get. So what's really interesting about this, if you actually look at William Whiston was actually a professor at Cambridge. It's actually matched up my point of scholars' opinions arguing over other scholars' opinions. The great thing about history for anyone listening is it's not rocket science. You can spend a lot of time in studying history and understand that you can argue if a historian is making fallacious reasoning or not, or he's making sense according to the data, according to you, because these arguments we're making right here aren't necessarily Greek or Latin or anything like that. So you have that room. But when we remove the three components, this is what we get. At that time there appeared Jesus a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds. He was a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure, and he gained a following both among many Jews and among many Greek origin. When Pilate, because of an accusation made by the leading men among us, condemned him to the cross, those who loved him previously did not cease to do so. So up to this very day, the tribe of Christians named after him had not died out. Well, when we look at this, this is actually the accepted position and scholarship of what it is. And we know this because the three components that make Josephus look like a Christian in the passage also shows a non-Josephian style in the Greek. And so that's important because we know it's not from him. And later church fathers even confirm this, saying that Josephus wasn't a Christian. And so we have this understanding this is an authentic writing from Josephus mentioning about Jesus. Now, the majority view of Josephus is that when the three components are removed, obviously, even as Dunn pointed out, it's a broad consensus. Even Louis Feldman, who is a leading Josephus scholar, notes 87 discussions on the authenticity of the passage. And even Geza Vermes notes that declaring the whole knows a forgery would amount to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Indeed, in recent years, most of the experts, including myself, have adopted a middle course, accepting that part of the account is authentic. Also adding to the list of authenticity is Josephian scholars Alice Wheatley and James Paget, who are two of the leading scholars today in the field of Josephian scholarship. When we go to Tacitus, Tacitus was a writer whose reliability cannot be seriously questioned. This is in the Classical Foundations of Modern Historiography, a Oxford publication press. You heard my friend talk about Oxford publication press earlier. Funny how it can shoot yourself in the foot. Talk about the methodology of historians. But neither human effort nor the emperor's generosity nor the placating of the gods ended the scandalous belief of the fire had been ordered. Therefore, to put down the rumor, Nero substituted as culprits and punished in the most unusual ways those who hated for the shameful acts, those who called the crowd Christians. The founder of this name, Christ, had not been executed in the reign of Tiberius by the procurator Pontius Pilate. The important part of this is that even Tacitus was known to be one of the greatest of Roman historians, with a penetrating insight into character and a sober grasp of these significant issues of the time. Why is this important? Well, he's mentioning Christ was crucified as an execution measure, which was crucifixion by definition under Pilate, under the reign of Tiberius. And so we get this message, and it would be quite the burden of proof for one to show that Tacitus has shown himself to be reliable many times over, and randomly for the passage of Jesus, talking about crucifixion, he randomly becomes unhistorical. Wouldn't make much sense. And to tie into your marker earlier, my friend, of talking about good old Robert E. Van Voorst, you mentioned that Robert E. Van Voorst talks about that Tacitus has mentioned in his sources something about that it may be hearsay or whatever. Yeah, I got 223. And the problem is Tacitus's claim on that simply derives from Meribar Serapion that you're saying, right? But Meribar Serapion himself, if you read that, oh no, not Meribar Serapion, but Van Voorst contradicts himself from Meribar Serapion on that book. So when he's talking about Tacitus, you're taking him for his levy for sentence that he posted in a book, but not the methodology that he's gaining for why he's gaining that idea. So for example, if you go to Robert E. Van Voorst in that book, he says why Tacitus probably isn't using rumors from Christians, because he was use the Latin terms dicun and firum, and he used that by Maurice Gogel's study Life of Jesus. But you didn't mention that in your opening. But when it comes to this part of like, he's probably using hearsay, no cited sources, no nothing, blank statement. But if you go to Meribar Serapion, even Robert E. Van Voorst contradicts himself because he doesn't know anything about Meribar Serapion. And a few sentences later, he says, well, he's probably not a Christian because that would be unlikely. But how would you know he's not a Christian if you don't know anything about the author? And so even he shoots himself in the foot. So some of the methodologies, you just quote mining people, doesn't really work out very well. So The reliability of Tacitus, which would be with Josephus to Tacitus, those are the two biggest, because I hold to Charlesworth. You can show that Josephus crucified, that Jesus crucified just by Josephus and Tacitus. It's not necessarily disputed. Given execution, this is referred to crucifixion, as I mentioned, of Roman methods and the claims prior to the 1st century of Jesus and his punishment of death with the Gospels and other writings. Also, it's hard to imitate Tacitus' style in Latin, and there's no signs of Christian influence. And also, because it talks about Christians in quite a negative manner, so it'd be, unsupervised. So Lucian Samosata has one, but I'm not used to doing debates, really. I've got 20 seconds here. I'm not used to using to do debates, really, within less of an hour. So this is quite new to me. But I'll get a few things in the rebuttal stage. But you've got the Pauline letters and the epistles in the New Testament, all according to ancient historiographical standards that agree. That's it. Your rebuttal.
Who's got my time? Who's got my time?
I got you. What were we doing for this one?
Okay, this is gonna
10?
be 2 10-minute rebuttals. Yeah.
Yep, 2:10.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds.
Yep. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Also, who's in here real quick? Hold on. Abdul, can you check your messages, please?
My messages?
Yeah. Why did Burp just spawn up here? Yeah, just
Yo,
check your
one
messages.
second. Yo, 1 second. By the way, Muslims in the chat and even the Christians, bro. If you're gonna make memes, like if you're a Muslim, fear Allah, bro. And if you're a Christian, respect the rules of the server. Like, don't send explicit shit, please.
No blasphemy, guys.
And no blasphemy either. Please and thing.
On both parts.
Yo, but I can't lie, that meme right there is funny.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds.
All right, take your time.
Okay. When you're ready, let me know.
All right. Go. Start it. All right.
Alright.
So, like I said, I was going to bring up Mike Lacona, where he goes over Lucian, Suitones, and Marabar Serapion. I didn't go over the methodology that the scholar was using to negate Lucian, Suitones, and Marabar Serapion. Mike Lacona, you know Mike Lacona. He's an evangelical Christian, or I forgot which kind of Christian he is, but he obviously is like an apologist as well, right? And I already refuted Tacitus as he isn't getting his information from Roman records, but just his dealings with the Christians. You're saying that he didn't get this from dealing with Christians. He mocks them. He mocks them for worshiping a God who received the ultimate punishment. He doesn't even label crucis ad fixi. He could have labeled the punishment as crucifixion. He doesn't even label it. And then he uses the terminology to refer to ultimate punishment. Ultimate punishment, like we said, can refer to many other things, like what Van Bruce was saying. He was saying it can refer to dealing or him being thrown to the dogs or him being burnt in Nero's gardens. It's not even specified, right? You said that I said McGlatchy says that Tacitus is unreliable. No, I was talking about the testimony of Flavinium. So Jonathan McGlatchy says, yes, I agree. And I read this out loud. Yes, I agree that the sources as the testimony of Flavinium are almost useless in terms of evidential value. However, Josephus and other ancient sources are useful in other ways, right? So you're just like, maybe you shouldn't have gotten like a little tipsy so you could actually understand like my claims and what I'm making. Okay, so now you're saying that this you were trying to bring up scholarship that says that this account of the crucifix is like historically reliable and it makes sense and everything checks out. Let's go to Gaze of Hermes. You know Gaze of Hermes. This is Jesus, nativity, passion, resurrection. This is the Jesus Gaze of Hermes, where he says, in sum, the reliability of the account of Jesus' appearance before the Sanhedrin and his condemnation to death is seriously undermined by the repeated contradictions and historical and legal improbabilities of Mark's account, which has been copied in substance by Matthew. Luke and John further muddy the waters. John ignores any trial of Jesus by a Jewish court, and Luke omits the night session of the Sanhedrin. However, the four evangelists are once more reunited in the report of the events which occurred the following morning. Okay, so when it comes to this being like a historical rival, attestation pertaining to what happened in his trial. This is like pretty silly, and every scholar will like laugh at the biblical accounts pertaining to the trial and how it was done, so on and so forth. Right, now let's go over Suitones, Marabarasarepion, and Thales, and I'll go over the methodology. I'll go over what Michael Licona in his book, the Jesus Resurrection of Jesus, right, by Michael R. Licona, where he says on page 246, when he talks about Celsus, he says, Celsus, our last pagan author to mention Jesus within a reasonably short period after his death, is Celsus, a middle Platonic philosopher who wrote an attack on Christianity titled The True Word, sometime between AD 177 and 180. Origen wrote a rebuttal to this work in AD 248. While Celsus's pamphlet or book is no longer extant, most of it is preserved by Origen, who quotes it verbatim in response. Of interest to our investigation, Celsus mentions the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. However, he shows familiarity with the gospel narratives, which appears to be his source. Accordingly, Celsus provides no independent material of interest for our investigation, and for this reason, Michael Licona says I assign him a rating of unlikely and unuseful, not useful. Okay, so that's for Celsus. There you go. You get this methodology. Every single one of these Christians, every single one of these not Christians, independent historians who are attesting to the alleged crucifixion of Jesus Christ are just getting it from dealing with Christians, or just getting it from like the gospel narratives and what they state within them. Okay, so and these writers are coming much later on. Like I said, nothing within the first century, nothing attesting to independently sources, primary sources pertaining to anything contemporary to Jesus' lifetime. No one digging up Roman records and finding anything of Pontius Pilate crucifying Jesus at the stake. No one bringing this up. Okay, so Lucian. Let's go to Lucian. Okay, so give me 1 second. We can go to Lucian, or we can go to Marabar Serapion, since I have it right here. A Syrian Stoic who wrote to his son from a Roman prison, Mata suspects he may be executed. This is in the same book, Michael Licona, where he goes over all these people. He says, may be executed. Although the only manuscript of the letter is dated to the 7th century, and the dating of the original is uncertain. Some place its composition around or shortly after AD 73, while others assert that its dating cannot be narrowed further than sometime after 73 AD. It is mention of Jesus' brief or the Jews by their killing their wise king because their kingdom was taken away at that very time. Little is known of Mata Bar Serapion, and one can only speculate pertaining to whether he had been a witness to Jesus' execution or received this information from another source, and if so, who that may have been. At most, Mata informs us of what some people of his day believed or knew of Jesus' fate, and he says I assign it a rating of not useful. Okay, Thales. Around AD 55, Thales wrote a history of the Eastern Mediterranean from the Trojan War until AD 55, or until AD 50. Although no longer extant portions of his writings have been preserved by others, of interest to us is a Christian author named Julius Africanus, who's AD 220, who interacts with Thalus's works. Unfortunately, that text is likewise lost. However, a section is cited by Georgius Silanus in the AD 800, speaking of the portents that occurred at the death of Jesus. Julius Africanus comments, on the whole world there pressed a most fearful darkness, and the rocks were rent by an earthquake, and many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. This darkness, Thales in the third book of his history calls, as appears to me without reason, an eclipse of the sun through a third-hand source. Thales Africanus Silanus. It appears that a historian named Thales made note of the darkness that occurred at the time of Jesus. Although this text cannot be ignored, it is not very useful. So not even mentioning the crucifixion, just mentioning the darkness that would have just been oral traditions being passed down of people trying to propagate this mythological idea of the darkness coming all of a sudden, and then Jesus dying, and then, like I said, the resurrection of the dead saints, which we're not going to get any addressment for, I'm pretty sure, right? So when it comes to Thales, Suitones, Marabar Serapion, I knew you're going to bring these guys up. No, I don't even have to do it myself. Your own evangelical Christians, your own apologists say that they are not useful. They're taking writings, the extant manuscripts pertaining to these writings are lost, right? When it comes to who's preserving them, a lot of them are preserved through Christian writers, through Christian church fathers. And when it comes to these writings, we have no extant manuscripts. When it comes to the differences, and when it comes to the gap from Suitones to Thales to Africanus, the gap is too wide to say anything is historically reliable. When it comes to them taking their sources from the Christians themselves and them giving us an account that's very related to the crucifixion narrative portrayed within the Gospels, then yeah, obviously this is just them getting their information from secondhand sources, or from dealing with the Christians themselves. Even if you want to grant it that, I'm not going to grant that for you. Okay, so now when it comes to, since like everything that you've mentioned is like dealt with ease, right? These are not independent historians that are recording anything pertaining to Jesus' life. They're just talking about what the Christians were saying. Now we have Ignatius of Antioch, right? So I'm going to make this challenge right here in my rebuttal. Ignatius of Antioch. So Ignatius of Antioch, right, who was alive in the year 30, or born in the year 30, and he was 3 years old when Jesus ascended into the heavens, and he was writing to these letters, or to these different provinces, to these different cities, a letter to the Cimmerians, a letter to the Trallians, a letter to the Magnesians, and a letter to the Philadelphians. And he mentions that every single one of these, or in every single one of these cities, there's a mention of people denying the crucifix. And this is dated in the first. This is going to be the 5th century. He's writing these letters around the year 106, and then later on he was thrown to the lions and eaten by the lions as well, right? So when it comes to Ignatius, who you're going to say has apostolic succession, one of the apostolic church fathers, he's telling us that there's multiple Christians that their beliefs would have been well solidified within the 1st century who deny Jesus's death. Let's just read a little bit from his writings, okay? So we're going to go over these 4 works right here. Letter to the Trallians. He says, "But if as some that are without God, that is the unbelieving, say that he only seemed to suffer, وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ." This is the narrative within the Quran. And he's saying that this belief was held by Christians within the 1st century, that Jesus only appeared to have suffered. If you're going to say they're Docetists, I'll gladly refute you with it, with the scholarship that I have from Matty Mikulski. And that'll be funny, where the arguments that he makes to refute that these people were Docetists. But even then, the only argument that you can make of these people might be Docetists are from the Trallians and Cimmerians. Philadelphians and Magnesians, there's no way in hell you can make this argument. And no scholarship is going to back you up on the letter to the Magnesians or the letter to the Philadelphians in these provinces. They were Docetists there, right? These people were Jewish Christians. They descended from James. They were upholding the Sabbath. They moved away from these ancient customs and traditions, as Ignatius says in the letter to the Magnesians, chapter 9. And he tells us that some are denying the death of Jesus, right? Even though they've accepted Pauline Christianity, they've come to a new hope. They've left Judaism. They've left the Judaizing ways, right? And they've come to Pauline Christianity, right? Which we know these 2 different groups would have been head to head with each other. So, letter to the Trallians. They say Jesus only seemed to suffer. And then Ignatius says, "Am I not then guilty of falsehood against the cross of the Lord?" Right? Now, letter to the Magnesians. Let's go over the letter to Magnesians, or letter to the Trallians, chapter 2. He says, "Not as certain unbelievers." He says, "Now he suffered all these things for our sakes, that we might be saved. And he suffered truly, even as also he truly raised himself. Not as certain unbelievers maintain that he only seemed to suffer, as they themselves only seemed to be Christians." This is letter to the Cimmerians. So we have 2 independent sources from Ignatius, where he's dealing with Christians of his own, and they're saying that they deny the crucifix and they don't believe Jesus died, and they only believe that they believe that he only appeared to have suffered. Exactly what the Quran says. So we see ikhtilaf, we see difference of opinion. Exactly what the Quran says. We see وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, the belief of the belief that's portrayed within the Quran. وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, Jesus only appeared to have suffered. There's an illusionary nature of Jesus suffering on the cross, and someone might have been crucified in his stead, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might have raised him, and let people believe that he died. Okay, so let the people that the Jews believe that he died, because the Jews were the ones who were boasting, saying we killed Messiah, we killed the Messiah, boasting and laughing after they mocked his mother, denigrated him, discredited him, and all these things, right? So now we can go to letter to Magnesians, right? And I want him to address these letters, right? Let's see if he can actually address these letters. Okay, so letter to Magnesians, chapter 9. "If therefore those who were brought up in the ancient order of things have come together to possession of a new hope, no longer observing the Sabbath, but living in the observance of the Lord's day, on which also our life has sprung up again by him and by his death." Whose death? Jesus' death, whom some deny. Whom some deny. "By which mystery we have obtained faith." So right here we have the Islamic narrative just from Ignatius. I can go to Paul. I'll go to Paul in my next rebuttal, and the conjecture that he had within his congregation of people denying the crucifix. But right here in Ignatius' congregation, we have 4 sources. 4 sources. I can go over the letter to Philadelphians next, but 4 sources that all reject the crucifixion. These are Christians within the 1st century who denied the crucifix, showing ikhtilaf, showing conjecture, and not showing that it's not a solidified fact within history that Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate. It's all you.
That's
all of you.
time.
All right. Is he done?
Yeah.
All right. 10 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Good.
Do you have to stream?
No, I'm setting the timer.
Oh, okay. When you're ready, just let me know.
All right. And start. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Again, I mentioned earlier of a la carding historians. I don't know what it is when he makes a point, he gets faster in talking to complete the point, but that's not really how history is going to operate. It's just fast miking different scholars making points. And we'll break down a few of these different deals. So one of the things you talked about was, let's see here. Yep. Originally, you're talking about the whole Trallians and Paul and these 1st century groups that apparently exist denying Jesus' crucifixion. They don't exist. You're mentioning a 2nd century writing talking about 2nd century groups, which matches with the development of Neoplatonic philosophy. And so I can quote you yet Edwin Yamauchi's work or others, but like this isn't a position in scholarship necessarily. So you're just really running off some like separatist argument. And I never once mentioned any church fathers. I even brought up in my argument to begin with. So you mentioned church fathers, something I'm not really going to mess with here. I can make my argument simply through Tacitus and Josephus. Now, you mentioned Vermes views Jesus' appearance. That has nothing to do with Jesus' crucifixion historically, because apparently there's like contradictions in the trial account you're talking about. But this doesn't make any sense, because even Vermes himself says that regardless of that, history allows the spectacle that Jesus was crucified, even if there are differences. I'm not coming here to present Christianity as the truth. I'm here to say Jesus rose from the dead and you should accept him as your Lord and Savior. The debate is, was Jesus Christ historically crucified based off treating documents as historical documents? And unfortunate, what you have at the moment is a 7th century document in the Quran and the Epistle of Barnabas, that's a medieval document, saying that Christ wasn't crucified, and everything else saying otherwise. And we can absolutely get into that in a cross-examination, no doubt about it. Now, you're using Lacona, Feldman, and others on these points to make your argument, but again, I think this is a big Frankenstein argument, because all you're doing is choosing particular points that these parts are agreeance on, and they're all agreeing that Christ was crucified. That, Lacona, Feldman, all of them agree Christ was indeed crucified. So you using these points to argue against it is kind of quite an odd one. Now, you argue multiple attestation for a document. You're talking about like Tacitus or something. There's only a couple documents, therefore it's unreliable because some of the books are registered as survival and the other ones are not extant. That is not a debate about Jesus' crucifixion anymore. That's a debate about how history operates. So, I mean, if you want to show good evidence why we shouldn't use Tacitus against all the Tacitian scholars that agree that Tacitus is the most reliable Roman historian, even though he only has a handful of manuscripts, go right ahead. But that's a change in the conversation. Again, another thing you said was earthquakes have no meaning to Jesus' crucifixion. Like, you're talking about earthquakes and that it could be a contradictory account or whatever. That was like odd to me. One, because even Dale Allison, if you've read his most updated work on the resurrection, he agrees that there's great evidence, and even from the National Geological Society presents great evidence for a earthquake during the period of Jesus' existence. But even if there's like contradictions in the account, I still don't see why you're not committing the fallacy of composition, which is obviously because one or two things err, therefore you throw the baby out the bathwater, therefore everything else errs. And again, that accounts decades later. You mentioned this a little bit, like the Gospels are a few decades removed. Tacitus is removed, from that period of a few decades later, and Josephus is writing around 90 AD from 30 AD. That's just a misunderstanding of how ancient history is done. Even Thomas Martin, who's a classicist, he's a professor of classicism, he writes in his book on ancient Greece that the term contemporary when it comes to ancient history is mostly delineated between the idea of things that happen decades after an event occurs. It doesn't have to be contemporary within the living witness of somebody existing. I have no problem, saying you that source or anything like that. And so I think that's just more of a misunderstanding of history. Now, the other thing you had was a few different points here that, like, Paul allegedly, this was in your beginning, that Paul allegedly that like Jesus's death was a curse. Doesn't matter. We're talking about his death. Did he die by crucifixion? Doesn't matter if it was a curse. This isn't a Christian conversation. So that doesn't matter. We're treating Paul as a historical person, the Pauline letters as historical documents, and the Gospels as historical documents. They can contradict. I hate to tell you, if you open up Tacitus, which is the most reliable Roman historian, he contradicts. He gets things wrong. Nevertheless, you don't commit the fallacy of composition. The 1 Corinthians Creed 15, the Pre-New Testament Creed you're talking about, there's like no Old Testament references of that. I mean, I'm not sure what that would really necessarily matter, considering, again, we're talking about the crucifixion. I think you have wrapped up in your mind a lot of these arguments you've made. It's not about the crucifixion, but some argument about the Christians. If we're talking about an argument about reliability of the Christian faith and history, that would be a different conversation. I feel like you've kind of, hit the forest for the trees on that one. Also, you mentioned that in Josephus from 1930 to 1980, there was like a compilation work of Josephus being completely or not forged completely. Yeah, I mean, if you go to those works, I have them downloaded, I can pull them up. They talk about that the only references of the whole Testimony Flavianum being forged, so therefore you couldn't say Jesus was crucified historically, would make sense if you were someone like Richard Carrier, and that position is not accepted in scholarship or Josephine scholarship. So you've ran your mounts on that one as well. The dialogue with Trypho says Jesus doesn't exist. That doesn't make any sense talking about his divine humanity claims, not his crucifixion or his existence. Even Alice Wheatley pointed out to Feldman on this point when it comes to it, so I don't understand what argument you're making there. Let's see here. I guess the final two would be going over Josephus and Tacitus, just off the top of my head. And again, if you want sources, I'll give you my sources. I have no problem. Josephus was situated geographically, chronologically, and vocationally when the apostolic preachers were preaching their message about Christianity when Jesus died. And so he was positioned actually the best you could as a historian according to ancient historiographical standards of what you should do as history in investigating something. Because according to Lucian's How to Write History, and according to other works of history in antiquity, if you're going to do it, you should be situated where you can actually talk to the witnesses, and you can be situated in that area where you know what they're talking about. So even if you wanted to say Abdulazeez that, oh, he's getting it from the Christians, it doesn't fucking matter. Because the burden of proof is on you to show that it's an unreliable source. And the reason why is because he, a acclaimed historian, is writing something down as a historiographical matter. And it's something that he's saying is reliable. And then we see it with Tacitus. Tacitus was part of the Roman, he's part of a prestigious organization where they officialized foreign cults. And Christianity and Judaism and others were a part of that. And so he knew the difference between them. And as Van Voorst points out a little bit with the Dicum Ferrunt terms, he knew the difference, even though Van Voorst kind of contradicted himself in his own methodology. But it doesn't take much to know that unless you're just trying to, pick up what he says because it agrees with what you say, and then leave the less because it doesn't agree with what you say, Abdulazeez, because Van Voorst agrees Jesus was crucified. So kind of funny how that works out. But you can see this point being made of even Tacitus was using even priestly organization. He probably got his information from even F.F. Bruce, who you didn't mention, who says it could possibly be from a Roman criminal record report, or even all the way up to some official documents he had of his priestly organization to officialize these different cults. Because there's no doubt you mentioned a couple different things about Caesar or other things with the spiritual or divination matter. But you should understand also the rules of how they operate regarding of that. So, yeah, that's it. I'm excited for cross-examination.
All right, then I'm guessing you yield the rest of your time.
That's 12 seconds.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I mean,
You
what
have
does it do?
use up
every last second.
Every
Use
second
last
counts.
Yeah, you're gonna need it. All right. Let me know when my time's ready.
We're doing cross examinations, and these were 15. How much were these?
These were 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Okay.
One more 10 minutes, and then we're gonna do
No.
cross-examination.
No. That wasn't it.
2 10-minute rebuttals.
I thought the rebuttals were supposed to be 15 minutes.
Yeah, no,
that's what I thought they were
so
15.
Squiddy, wait, time out, Squiddy. Just to make sure, because Squiddy's the moderator, we both agreed to make sure the format was, because we changed it 17 minutes, 10-minute rebuttal, 15-minute cross-examination, 5 or 10-minute closing, we're done, and then I think the other person wanted to add a Q&A, we could add a Q&A.
Yeah,
There's
that's why
no
I
rebuttal
said
to
that.
the rebuttal.
One person, hold on.
It's
I
straight into
typed out.
cross-examination. That can be a rebuttal, friend.
Wait, 1 second. Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
fine.
I
That's fine.
typed out. Wait, I typed out everything that you said that we do. So it
Yeah.
was 17-minute intros for both of you. So you guys both get one 17-minute intro. And then 2 10-minute rebuttals means you each get 2.
Yeah, let's
It's
look
not
at our
two in
DMs.
total.
Let's look at our
It's not
DMs,
two.
Bless. Let's look at our DMs. So I'm gonna put it in the side chat where I put it for Bless in
And then
DMs.
for the
All right.
cross exam, it's 1 15-minute each. So you
Yeah,
each
bro,
get
Bro,
one.
this
I
is
don't
why
think that we
you
have
don't
to
hit your
go
little
through
teary
this.
eyed
Wait,
state, bro.
hold on,
yeah,
Abdulaziz.
15 minutes. So yeah, cross exam's supposed to be 15 minutes.
No, wait, this is the wait.
Okay.
I said we can do. I said we can do
All right, no,
cross.
we can do it.
I said yeah. Wait. This is what I
Let
said.
me
So this is what I
let
said.
me use
And
the
I put it.
restroom.
Look, I put
You
it in the
can do
side
your
chat. I put it in the
10-minute.
side chat. So
No,
everyone
yeah,
look.
we can do
Everyone can look
your.
in the side
I
chat.
didn't
Like,
see that. Yeah. I didn't see the two
there you
times.
go.
You can do your extra rebuttal. That's fine.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Give me one
Okay.
second.
So
Let me
this
use
is
the
why
restroom.
you don't take a little swindle and then like hit your cherry ice flavored
Okay,
Sprite or whatever.
Abdulazeez, there's no need to talk.
Sweetie,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. Why don't
Abdulaziz.
you?
The
Okay,
problem is you don't
let's
realize
calm
is your
down.
worst nightmare is waiting for you in that
Bro,
cross
but the problem
examination.
is
So
like
you
we got
really
the
need to
format
shut
laid
up.
out.
okay.
And like
Let's chill.
it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, Abdulaziz, you need to shut up. I'm just using the bathroom because I'm gonna kick you in
Because
this
if you're gonna
crap.
insult, then I'm gonna insult you for speaking like
keep sucking on that
you're an
vape.
hour, speaking like you're
Yeah,
okay.
keep
Christian,
sucking on that
Okay,
vape. Sucking on that
both
vape.
of you, stop.
Yeah, Squiddy, bro. It's between me and him, bro. Like we don't need a little pet. Okay.
All right. I was just joshing.
Leafy, help. Okay, all of you guys need to calm down, please. Every
Yeah,
single
guys,
one
can
of
we just
you.
keep it respectful? Like, he has had a
Yes.
good back and forth,
Very
so just keep it
difficult.
on that wavelength. Keep it on that
It's
wavelength,
very
guys.
difficult to make two grown men be quiet. So it's just,
Yes. I will unmute all three of you. Please keep it respectful. Abdulaziz, that includes you. I agree. Again, I'm gonna do this server or like this announcement. Kids, do not drink and do drugs, please.
don't drink,
Uh,
don't do drugs. And in the
if
side
you're learning
chat,
anything from
please.
this is why. Okay.
No blasphemy on either side as well, bro. I hate to have to remind you guys, bro.
Who else did I not unmute? That's easy. You can literally unmute yourself. Why are you making me do this? Okay.
Okay.
When you're ready, let me know and you can begin.
Bro's taking a piss.
Okay. He said that you can go, but obviously I think
Why
why
would I go? Like
Obviously,
why
I
would I
think that he
go?
should.
I mean, it is like
Obviously, I think
he
that he
has been
should be here
disregarding everything I'm
too.
saying. Hey,
Yeah,
Bro,
he's
he
being
has
a little
eager to like
disingenuous.
listen to everyone.
He's like, I'm not even gonna respond to anything at all.
But like, it wouldn't make any difference, bro. He's not
Stop
responding to
giggling,
anything.
Stop giggling, bro.
Oh, everybody, I forgot. To the people in the audience, thank you for being here. Don't forget there is a Nitro giveaway going on because of the debate. So go and enter into it. They muted
Why was
me,
I
Religion of
muted?
Peace. No way.
Squiddy, are you real?
Squiddy, mic up, bro.
Are you real?
You cannot be real.
All right. So do your 10-minute, I'll do my 10-minute, and then we'll do this cross examination because I really just care about cross examination.
All right.
Yeah, sounds
I
good.
really just give a shit about cross examination. I don't care about all this opening bullshit.
Same here, but we have to like actually.
Okay, well, do you want to cut it
address
to 5 minutes? So you don't like, because no offense, Abdulaziz, because everyone else can attest to this. Most people like you talk like Eminem from Rap God.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Well, I
So-
told you. Well, yeah, that's why we're doing prolonged time, but you're trying to shorten the time. So, okay.
I mean, if you want to
Or
do
do
10
prolonged
minutes,
time,
I'm
so we
not
can get
running
everyone-
away from you, boss. You can do
Alright.
10 minutes. I don't care.
Beautiful.
You want 10 minutes?
Okay, let's go over it.
10?
Yeah, I want 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, when you're ready, let me know.
Okay. So, start it.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So let's just like get a little laughs and giggles out of the way. Like this guy literally just said, I do not have to address anything in Ignatius's congregation because these are independent historians who are writing about this. Ignatius is dealing with Christians. So we're going over beliefs that were held by the Christians within the first century. We're seeing if the crucifixion is conjecture historically, if there's conjecture pertaining to the crucifixion, or if it's a solidified fact within history that Jesus was crucified. Now, we're looking at this from a theological perspective. You believe Jesus was risen from the grave. You've debated the resurrection of Jesus. Why? Because there's attestation to it. So if we're looking at this from a theological perspective, not just like a naturalistic perspective, which you're appealing to all these atheist scholars that say, of course, they're going to say that Jesus was crucified historically, or he died from old age, or as the Jews say within the Sanhedrin 43 verse 20, that he died by way of stoning, or he died by any method. Of course, this is what atheist scholars are going to say, right? But when it comes to us looking at this from a theological perspective, we're going to see historically is that there's conjecture pertaining to what people are claiming actually happened to Christ. So some people are going to claim that Simon of Cyrene was crucified, right? Like what we've seen within the Basilidian writings, right? When Irenaeus is dealing with them, they say Simon of Cyrene was crucified, and then this is Basilidians. He says, I have apostolic succession from Glaucius running through Peter to the Matthias to Jesus, right? So he has apostolic succession solidified, and he says Simon of Cyrene was crucified instead of Jesus, and then Jesus transfigured, and he took the appearance of Simon, and Simon is the one who, Simon transfigured and took the appearance of Jesus, and he was the one who was crucified on it. So you didn't deal with this. You never dealt with the Basilidians. So this is why we need actual time, so you can actually address these points. Us going in circles about Tacitus and Josephus, even though like I already rebutted it in my first 15 minutes, is like pretty laughable, and it shows that you weren't like ready for this debate. Okay, so not only do we have the Gospel of Judas that is dated to the year 150 to 180, second century. So we're going to go over denial sources, because he said, what did he say? He said, only the Quran, chapter 4, verse 157, Surah Nisa, right? They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but he only appeared to have suffered. He said, this is the only source that we get where there's a denial of Jesus' crucifixion. And then he said, Epistle of Barnabas, medieval times, 1500. Oh, did I bring this up? No, I'm going over early sources, early Christians from all these different groups, whether you label them as heretics, it doesn't matter. Do not commit the genetic fallacy where we disregard the content of a source just based, or the content of a specific source just based on the group or the founder of this religion. Right? We're not going to commit the genetic fallacy. The history like knows no religion, right? So when it comes to attestation, when it comes to writings that we have, Nag Hammadi, preserved in the Nag Hammadi literature, preserved from the church fathers, where they're dealing with all these quote unquote heretics who deny the death and crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, right? Then we can use this as a source to understand that there would have been theological disputes and different narratives pertaining to what actually happened to Jesus. Exactly what the Quran says. You don't even realize, blessed, that this proves the Quranic narrative. Why? Because the Quranic narrative says that there was ikhtilaf, difference of opinion pertaining to what happened to Jesus, that the people had shak, that they had doubt.
Yo, you good, bro?
I was reading a
think,
book. I guess he
think maybe he
backed
got a
out. I
call or
lost
something.
interest in what he was saying, but he can
Yo, don't
continue
be
as he
Okay,
likes.
I'm back. Okay.
You
So
were
anyway,
at 6:53.
to
Hold
continue,
on.
Okay. Give me
No,
like
I
10 more
just-
seconds.
Second.
Yeah,
Yeah, just give him 30 seconds back.
that's fine. It's fine. Like 15 seconds, man. Okay. So Bless already knows he's committing the genetic fallacy, right? He's disregarding the content of these sources because he's saying, I don't care. They're able to say, but it seems like he's not even informed of these groups. He's not even informed of these groups because he's telling us the only sources that deny the crucifix is the Quran that comes in the 7th century and the Epistle of Barnabas, which I never bring up in any of my any of my sources or any of the conjecture that I was bringing up. So we have the Gospel of Judas that's dated to the year 150 180 CE, 2nd century, which says in chapter 53, where Jesus talks, another man who will bear my cross and suffer in my place. The Apocalypse of Peter, dated to 130, right, has a 100 to 130. It says that Peter has a vision of Jesus sitting on a tree watching another man who resembles him, who was put on the cross, while he ascends into heaven, where Jesus ascends into heaven and laughs down on him, right? Exactly what the Quran says. وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. Right here we have the second great treatise of Seth, mid-2nd century, preserved in the Nag Hammadi library, right? If we're going to go over extant manuscripts, and you're saying extant manuscripts don't matter, it doesn't have to be contemporary at the time, then we can play this game. We have sources, we have documents, we have groups galore that were all denying the crucifix for a multiplicity of reasons, for a plethora of reasons, whether it be their own soteriology, whether it be their own Christology, whether it be their own theology pertaining to Christ. That doesn't matter. We're showing that there's conjecture pertaining to what happened to Christ. So if you have a bunch of different theories, a bunch of different groups coming, a bunch of different things that what happened to Jesus, then this is just proving the Islamic narrative beautifully. Maybe you should read that verse one more time and actually understand how history is working and how we're looking at this from a theological perspective and not just a naturalistic perspective. We're not atheists here. We're believers. We're believers of God. We believe God can intervene with creation. We believe something metaphysical or something supernatural can happen, like Jesus ascending into the heavens and not being crucified, right? You believe the same thing, but you believe he died and then 3 days later he rose from his grave, right? I believe he rose from his grave and didn't die, right? So we're already having 3 denial sources that I'm going over, okay? 4, Gospel of Basilidians, right? Early to mid-2nd century. Irenaeus quotes it. They have apostolic succession. They deny the crucifix. They say Simon of Cyrene was crucified. Secret Acts of John says in one that's dated to 150 CE says he only appeared to have suffered. And they quote Psalms 22. They say he was in the mouth of the lions. He was in the mouth of the lions. Yet I was not afflicted. The word for word, you can see, and I can make a correlation. I put this on my TikTok, right? You can see the correlation. They're literally going over the prophecies within the Old Testament. These groups like the Basilidians quoting Psalms 2. In the Secret Acts of John, right? We have Psalms 22 being quoted, and they have a different narrative pertaining to how to interpret Psalms 22, right? With Psalms 22, if you read verse 19 to 24, you'll see that the servant is crying and praying to God, and he's in the mouth of the lions, and he gets saved if you read verse 24, right? So letter to the Magnesians, which he didn't address whatsoever, and I knew he wasn't going to address. So Ignatius is saying, tell me how this doesn't count historically, that Ignatius is telling us of people who have been taken away from their ancient customs, so they're practicing the ancient customs, traditions, and rituals of Mosaic laws, and they were most likely would have been followers of James the Just from the years 30 to 80 CE, while him and Peter were the head of the church, or Jerusalem, or whoever you want to say was head of the church, right? We can see that these people stem from there, and he says they've come to a new hope, so they're no longer relying on Judaizing, they're no longer relying on the works of the law. Now they've come to Paulinian soteriology, Paulinian doctrine of salvation, and he says some deny, some deny. I read it out for you in the letter to the Magnesians, chapter 9. He says they deny his death, they're denying the death of Jesus. So we have groups within the first century who are Jewish Christians, clearly from the writings, clearly from any scholarship that I bring you, where these are Jewish Christians who denied the crucifix, who denied Jesus's death, and these Jewish Christians, what we know of them historically, like the Ebionites and Nazarenes, the early Nazarenes who were tied to James the Just, and tied to the other disciples, we know that they would have accepted a prophetic Messiah, not a divinic Messiah. We know that they would have accepted a monolithic unipersonal idea and concept of God. We know Alan F. Siegel says they were the majority within the first century. We know from Hans Joachim Schoeps and his book Jewish Christianity, he says they rejected a soteriological interpretation of the cross, and they still kept up the works of the law, and they believed the Old Testament was corrupted, and they believed everything pertaining to what we believe of Islam. And that's why scholars like Jeffrey J. Butz, even Hans Joachim Schoeps says in his book on Jewish Christianity, page 142, and in the conclusion of Jeffrey J. Butz's book, The Lost Teachings of Christianity, we say the Islamic narrative of Jesus is very much in conformity with that of the Jewish Christians, right? So we have to understand. So now I can prove exactly the Islamic narrative that I wanted to prove, the Islamic narrative, the Islamic belief pertaining to soteriology, pertaining to the idea and the mission of Christ, pertaining to who Christ was, pertaining to who God is, the monolithic unipersonal idea and concept of God, is all there within the first century with these Jewish Christians who were denying the crucifix in Ignatius's congregation. You can, but you're not going to address any of these sources. So what do we have? Ignatius's letter to Magnesians, a denial source. What we have, the letter to the Philadelphians, first century denial. Letter to the Cimmerians, first century denial. Paul's writings debating those in his congregation, like if we see in Galatians chapter 3 verse 1, where we see like all throughout this these writings in Galatians, he says there's people turning to a different gospel, and he says let them be accursed if they go, if an angel or an angel from the heavens preach to you a different gospel contrary to the one that we preach to you, let him be accursed. Galatians chapter 1 verse 6, Galatians chapter 1 verse 8, he says my gospel is preached to me not of man origin but of divine origin from Jesus Christ. Galatians chapter 1 verse 11 12, and he says in Galatians chapter 1 verse 20, in what I'm writing to you I swear I do not lie. And then later on Galatians chapter 2, he says there's John and Cephas saying remember the poor ones, and the poor ones over here they're keeping up the works of the law. Poor, I can say evionim, where the poor ones derive from. And scholars like James D. Tabor will say, we know of Ebionites, they were there within the primitive church. They lead back to James. They were all followers of James. They all glorified James and denigrated Paul. And then we even see in Galatians chapter 3, verse 1, where he says, where Paul is saying, oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Didn't we publicly portray Jesus Christ as crucified? So even early on, right? And we have other verses like 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23, which there's multiple interpretations, but even scholars like David Oliver Smith will tell you that these people, the Jerusalem's pillars, they did not recognize Jesus Christ as crucified, right? Pertaining to how they still kept up the works of the law. We know James is the one who still kept the works of the law. If we read Acts chapter 21, verse 18 to 24, and we understand that there was early Christians who did not take a soteriological interpretation from the cross and who denied the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, who were bewitched according to Paul, who was a stumbling block to them. And if you read the context of the passage, you can say it's referring to the Jews. Well, we can easily say that this is referring to Jerusalem's pillars, because the whole chapter in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 is talking about a church divided over leaders. Obviously, the church divided over leaders is going to have different interpretations of Christ. Some of them are going to be Judaizing. No one is taking a soteriological interpretation of the cross other than Paul himself, right? The apostate of the law, right? Like other writings we have attributed to Peter say, right? And we understand first century, all these denial sources are not in your favor, but in mine, and in the Quranic narrative as well, right? We have the Apocryphal of James as well, dated from the year 100 and 200, denial of the crucifix. I'll put all these sources. All these sources I can already post, or I already have posted on my page, but I can put them in the side chat for anyone who wants to see them. I dare you to challenge me and say bring any of these sources, I'll bring any of these sources gladly. So we have 10 documents that deny the crucifix in the first and second century. The church fathers who are having problems with these people saying they're denying the crucifix. Right now, I'm going over Paul and his congregation. I can go quote you even NIV Faith Study Bible that talks about Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. And it says some of the super apostles might have downplayed, undermined, or outright rejected the crucifixion, right? Because he's saying there's another Christ that these people are preaching. We preach Christ crucified, right? This is what we have from Paul's writings. Paul is dealing with other church leaders who vehemently disagree with all of his beliefs. And we'll go over this in our next rebuttals. 10 minutes for you.
You okay over there?
Oh yeah, I'm getting my timer set. All right, ready to start. 3, 2, 1. All right. One, I'd like just to say right off the bat, this tactic that you're using called Eminem from Rap God is not helpful. Not only do I not pick up every single point to write down to object, it's dishonest, but even everyone else in the audience can pick up. You're not picking up everything you're putting down. It's annoying. But from there, let's go to some main points. One, you keep mentioning this whole deal of that this is a theological question, not a historical question. I'm not sure like where you're at. This is a historical question. Was Christ historically crucified is the question. There is no theological ramifications behind that. This is not a question about Christianity's reliability or anything of that. It's about was Christ crucified according to what we consider historical documents. That is the question. So you keep running into all these other things like the Old Testament is corrupted, you brought up, according to some scholar. Like, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? It has nothing to do with Jesus' crucifixion. It just makes no sense. Also, you talk about this kind of concept of that, let's see here. Well, one, you didn't really mention much of Tacitus that I brought up in your rebuttal. So I'm kind of curious how you argue with that in the cross-examination, because Tacitus is very much reliable as a Roman historian documenting actual historiography, and the burden of proof would be on the other one to show that he's not using critical methods of historiography on this part of the Annals, considered the Annals as most reliable historical work. Same with Josephus, I would argue as well, considering he was situated vocationally and geographically to hear the apostles preach about this message. This isn't a message about if Jesus rose from the dead, if this guy performed miracles. It's about was he crucified. And so when we look at independent sources, hence multiple attestation, which is the single most important historical criterion to accept one's assessment of a conclusion, we get that. Tacitus isn't borrowing from Josephus, and even Steve Mason, a leading Josephine scholar, I'm sure you're familiar with Steve Mason, points out in his book on Josephus in the New Testament, they're not borrowing from each other, and they're not gaining it directly from the New Testament, so it's independent. And so when we see this, we have multiple independent reports that are very early indicating this claim. Now, this other thing you keep bringing about, because I'm not going to take 7 minutes up on this, because I feel like a lot of your things were not good rebuttals. But you kept talking about this idea of the Trailians and these first century groups allegedly that believe Christ wasn't crucified. I'm waiting to see the evidence for that. And if you quote me a scholar, I want you to quote me to the methodology of that scholar on how they derive that conclusion. Because as I brought up in my opening, with history, the great thing about it is we're not dealing with rocket science. When it comes to the Greek and the Hebrew, you have interlinears and you can do exegesis properly. You have that right. So I'm curious to see how you're deriving this conclusion instead of a second century group. Because the writings are from the 2nd century. And it seems we're proclaiming to a 2nd century group. So I'm curious about that one. But also, even if we were to say, and here's the big hiccup on it, if it was a 2nd century, if it was a late 1st century group or something, just to play ball with you, I'd like to see why that indicates that the Gospels, the most early reliable source, are indicating Christ was crucified, and Tacitus and Josephus independently are saying Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Others are not to be. Through historical methodology. This is a historical question, not theological. That's it. Your turn. Cross-examination. Let's go.
And
All
you
right.
said 15-minute cross-examinations, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Or how? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful. 15 minutes, okay. So just give me 2 seconds, and we're going to go over this one by one. All right.
Oh, wait,
Ready
1
when
second.
you are.
Oh, wait, just to clarify, everyone's familiar with how a cross-exam works.
Yep.
He
No,
asked
no, no
The
asking
only
questions
thing I
back.
ask is if he asks me a question, I can answer it within 20 seconds. If it's over 20 seconds, and he can switch switch it. Because what I'm not going to do is him ask me a question, me in the middle of answering it, and then switch it within 20 seconds. Not doing that. Give me 20 seconds to
Yep.
answer your question.
Abdulazeez,
Move on
you
to the
hear that?
next. That's 3 questions per minute. You have 10 minutes. That's 30 questions.
Okay, and let me know if this seems fair. If the question is just a yes or no, then you answer with a yes or no on both
Sounds good.
sides.
Sounds good.
All right,
Sounds good.
we're all good.
Yeah. All right.
All right, let's go.
3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay. Letter to Magnesians right here. So Ignatius says, and I'll just read it out real quick for you. Okay. If therefore those who were brought up in the ancient order of things have come together, come to the possession of a new hope, no longer observing the Sabbath, but living in the observance of the Lord's day, on which also our life has sprung up, again by him and by his death. Whose death? Blessed, whose death? Whose death?
That was
Are
the
you asking me a
question
question?
towards you. Yep.
It's not like yes or
Who's
no here. It sounds
death?
rhetorical.
Who's death? It's not just gonna be yes or no. Like we can like I can ask
I
you
know,
like.
but it sounds rhetorical.
Okay, yeah. Who's death? Who's that? Okay, so who's death? Obviously Jesus is, right? Whom some deny. Whom some deny. Is this Ignatius talking about people who denied the death of Jesus? Yes or no? And scholarship is right there, so you can know.
Yes.
Matt Mikulski.
Yes,
Beautiful.
Ignatius is talking about people during his time period that are denying the death of Jesus.
Beautiful. So right here we have a belief held by Muslims in today's day and age that Jesus didn't die. That Ignatius is
In
saying
the
that
2nd
people
century.
within his provinces had this belief. Magnesians. So Ignatius is writing these letters when? Do you know? Just yes or no?
Yeah, 2nd century.
No. What year? What year exactly? Do you know?
I don't. It's early 2nd century.
106, the year 106. He's writing these letters, and he's
Well,
commenting.
that's if you go to Wikipedia.
Provinces, yeah. He's writing on these cities. No, I can appeal to Matt Mikulski in this book, even in this book that I quoted right here.
Go
I
to
can appeal to him.
Wikipedia. Have fun with it.
Yeah, what? So yeah, so early 2nd century, year
Right
106. Year 106. People are denying the death of Jesus. Okay, next letter. One by one, we're gonna get him to concede on this one by one because he doesn't want to address this in any of his rebuttals. So we're gonna have to get him to address it whenever I'm in the Q&A. Okay, so right here. Next letter. Right here. So letter to the Trallians. I'll put it in the side chat. It's for my notes. Okay, and letter to the Cimmerians. Right here. So let's just read these two. Okay.
Would you like me to read for you, sir?
Of course, if you'd
Of
like.
course,
Okay.
I can read the highlight point just to make it easier.
Dude, let's just read in context, okay? But if
Okay.
as though some, I'll just read it. But if as some that are without God, that is the unbelieving, say that he only seemed to suffer, they themselves only seeming to exist, then why am I in bonds? Why do I long to be exposed to the wild beasts? Do I therefore die in vain? Am I not then guilty of falsehood against the cross of the Lord? Right? Is this Ignatius dealing with people who say Jesus only appeared to have suffered? He didn't actually suffer in reality. He only appeared to have suffered. Just yes or no?
Correct, in the 2nd century.
Okay. Does the Quran say وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ? Did that Jesus only appear to have suffered to his people?
Correct. And
Beautiful. Did you say that the only sources that say that Jesus that deny Jesus' death and that say that he only appeared to have suffered is the Quran chapter 4 verse 157 and the Epistle of Barnabas that comes in the year 150 the 1500s? Did you say that?
denying directly the crucifixion, yes.
This is not a deny. It's word for word. Whom some deny his death, and they're saying that he only appeared to have suffered. So right here, bless the argument that the debate is conceded.
You
right
asked
here.
me a question. Do you want my answer?
You gave me your answer. What?
No,
Why are you getting all scared?
no, because you didn't ask a yes or no.
Go ahead. I said yes or no. Did you say
I
that
can
the only
answer it
sources...
very quickly for you.
Go ahead.
There's a difference because even as Islamic tradition, even early on when it comes to Gnostic tradition, there was ideas of how, if Christ died, according to Neoplatonic philosophy, right?
Okay.
And so the ideas derived, like you talked about earlier, docetism would be one idea, but obviously there's a difference between the spirit and the flesh, and there's multiple different ways of Christ's denial of crucifixion from the 2nd century onwards. And so, no, it's not going to be comported exactly how the Quran has it in the Epistle of Barnabas. Nevertheless, it's an echo of what is to come.
Okay. You finished?
And this is Solomon Morad from Yale in Islamic Studies that has this.
More than 20 seconds. You wanted 20 seconds.
It wasn't more than 20 seconds.
So go ahead. My time. That was more than 20 seconds. Okay. Anyways, this is already, the debate is conceded. You're saying the Islamic belief was there held by Christians in the early 1st century. You're going to say they're Docetists. Whoopsie. I have Matty Mikulski right here. The formation of the early church who says these weren't Docetists. Who he says, I argue they weren't Docetists. And they denied. I'm gonna read if you'd like me to. Okay.
I never once said early 1st century. That's dishonest. I have to speak about that. I said 2nd century. I've said it for every one of your writings from the Trallians. In other words, it shows early to mid.
Year 106. Year 106. So the Gospel of John.
Early 1st century. Don't put words in my mouth.
Do scholars date the Gospel of John to the year 110?
No, only John 90 to 110.
Okay. Well, right here, scholarship. Right here, side chat. When is the dating of the Gospel of John? scholars assert year 110,
90 to
110, 100,
110. Right.
So,
Did you know Mark?
so you're going to take the Gospel of John as a historical document. So we can take Ignatius of Antioch and his congregation, who's writing against Christians, who obviously they didn't poof, and these beliefs spawned out of nowhere. Obviously, these beliefs were held earlier on. Why? Because he talks about the Magnesians, in the letter to Magnesians, how these people abandoned their ancient customs, how they abandoned the Mosaic customs and traditions and rituals that they would have been upholding under the Church of Jerusalem in James's congregation, right? And he says they deny. They come to Paulinian Christianity and they deny his death. They deny his death. So we can say that this traces back to James. This belief traces back to James because these are people who've moved away from the Christology and the soteriology and the theology of James, and now they're still coming to Ignatius and they're saying we don't believe Jesus died. Why? Because maybe he told some disciples that I wasn't gonna die. Maybe
I'm sorry,
there
is
was
there a question here
yeah,
somewhere?
yeah. You said what?
Is there a question here somewhere?
No,
Because this is cross-examination, not you rebutting the entire time.
Yeah. So Ignatius dealing with Christians. No, I'm saying that your point on them being in the 2nd century doesn't hold up because this was a belief that would have been well solidified within the 1st century that you already conceded to.
Okay,
So next question.
I never once conceded to that. That's just dishonest.
You said that there was Christians who believed in Ignatius's congregation that Jesus only appeared to have suffered. You said
In the
that there was
2nd century,
people
according to your writings by the church
so why do you
fathers.
say 7th century? Why do you say 7th century? Islamic narrative that denies Jesus' death is only in the 7th century. Why do you say that? Were you ill-informed?
No, regarding of where we see where the Quran seems to get its borrowing from is from the Epistle of Barnabas.
You're saying the Epistle of Barnabas came in the year 1500, so this verse didn't exist in the 700s?
The Epistle of Barnabas came in the medieval times. I'm not sure exactly where it came from.
What, bro? You're absurd. You're demented. You're demented. So he just said word for word that the Epistle of Barnabas, that the Quran is drawing from the Epistle of Barnabas, and he said the Epistle of Barnabas is a medieval forgery that comes around the years when 1400, 1500. So this Quran verse didn't exist, and then after the 1500s, this Quran verse spawns into existence. Chapter 4, verse 157 within the Quran. Are you good in the head?
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to like talk over anyone else here, like or to like take over your time, but you're saying stuff that I'm saying that just is dishonest. You're putting words in my mouth here.
Did
You
say
said
the Quran,
once that I held that Christians believed there was a group in the 1st century, when every single time these writings you asked me a question, I said the 2nd century with clarification, and now you're doing it again. That's dishonest as hell. What are you doing?
Bro's not even tracking what he said. You said the Quran draws from the Epistle of Barnabas. So, anyways, let's move on. Let's not hear you complain and like rant.
Epistle of Barnabas is later in the 2nd century.
So right here, I'm gonna read Raymond Brown. So Raymond Brown, when we look to John's Gospel, Raymond Brown talks about why he rejected the Simonian tradition. However, and this is in his book, The Death of the Messiah, Raymond E. Brown, in volume 2, he says in page 917. However, there seems to be a deliberate quality, and I put in the side chat. You can read along with me, Habibi. Okay. However, there seems to be a deliberate quality in John chapter 19, verse 17, indicating that while John knew the Simonian tradition and thus implicitly testified to its antiquity, he rejected it for his own reasons. Why would John so firmly reject Simon's role in favor of Jesus carrying his own cross? Some think that the above-mentioned Gnostic view denounced by Irenaeus, in which Simon was the one who was crucified, was already in circulation and John was refuting it. So we have Raymond Brown saying it's a scholarly opinion to hold, and we know of other groups that claimed apostolic succession, saying Simon of Cyrene was the one who was crucified and not Jesus. We know this in Irenaeus of Lyons' congregation, where Irenaeus writes about these Christians, the Basilidians, how they had apostolic succession, and they say Simon of Cyrene was the one who was crucified instead. Why is the scholar saying that John might be refuting the Simonian tradition that would have been in circulation? So do you think I can make a plausible case that Simon of Cyrene, beliefs of Simon of Cyrene being crucified instead of Jesus would have been there within the 1st century? We have apostolic succession. We have Irenaeus of Lyons. We have the scholars agreeing with me.
Blessed, your mic is not on.
Yeah, we can't hear you, bro.
Yeah. My bad. Can you like repeat that? Because you're doing this like eminent thing.
So Simonian tradition. Why is scholars saying the Simonian tradition dates to the 1st century? Why do we have attestation from Irenaeus of Lyons where Basilides is saying that this idea of Simon of Cyrene being crucified instead of Jesus traces back to Jesus himself?
Well, the only problem they have is Raymond E. Brown's Birth and Death of the Messiah, that I'm pretty sure you're getting this from. He doesn't give a methodology on why he breaks down that conclusion.
Okay, so
that's the death of the Messiah. Word.
It's the death of the Messiah. Okay, so why did John omit this? Why did John omit the Simonian tradition if all the gospel narratives don't omit the Simonian tradition? Why? Can you give me another different inference?
Well, again, I think there's a very big back and forth on that. But again, it doesn't hinder anything of if Jesus was crucified or not. Because even if Blomberg points out that it's not that, like, it's a back and forth position when it comes to John. From 90 to 110, if he's talking about these ideas, maybe people, denying the crucifixion. And if John is in 110, which is in the parameter of 90 to 110, late 1st century to early 2nd century and matches up when I'm talking about the Neoplatonic philosophy, you still haven't talked about Mark, Matthew, Luke, or Paul talking about Jesus' crucifixion or the pre-New Testament tradition.
Okay, 20 seconds plus. Okay, so bro, this is insane. Like, you're not addressing, you're saying Neoplatonic philosophy. You don't even know what Docetists believe. Yeah, obviously Docetists had their own beliefs, but I bring you scholarship, Matty Makowski, where he says that these people were drawing from Jewish Christian, they're drawing from Jewish Christian ideas and interpretations and beliefs. Why? Because they didn't claim a superior God and a lesser God like what the Docetists claim. They did not reject the bodily body of Jesus Christ within his life and ministry. They only rejected certain particular events, and he specifies the suffering and the resurrection of Jesus. And they said there was an illusionary nature to it, and it says it precedes that of Cerinthus. It precedes that of Cerinthus. So this belief would have preceded that of Cerinthus. Docetists emerged in the 2nd century, Habibi. So you don't even know. You're not even aware of this, right? Now we're gonna go to Paul's congregation. So this is
again, was there a question there, or are you just making statements again? Because when I do cross-examination, I actually make questions. I just don't make rebuttals.
Stop beating on my time. Like, you sound pretty stupid right now. You're saying that you're not addressing any of my points. You're saying this is a Neoplatonic philosophy. So I'm addressing how this isn't a Neoplatonic philosophy, and that this isn't Docetism that these people were upholding. If they're talking about the Jewish customs and traditions that they would have been upholding, and how they would have been tied back to who else would have been upholding these Jewish customs and traditions, James, that we see in the book of Acts, chapter 21, verse 18 to 24. And these people deny Jesus' death, and we have clear attestation within the 1st century of people denying the death of Jesus. Now we're going to go to Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. Have you read this verse, Blessed? He's smiling, okay? And let's go to the NIV Faith Study Bible and see what they say about it. Okay? So Paul, in his congregation, he's dealing with Judaizers who reject, and he calls them bewitched, and because they have a different understanding of the cross, So why does he say, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? But didn't we publicly portray Jesus as crucified to you?" Is Paul dealing with people who are having problems, like what NIV Faith Study Bible says, that they're undermining or downplaying or outright rejecting the crucifixion, and Paul is the only one who wants to go and proclaim Christ crucified? Is this an issue that we have over here, that people are struggling to accept the crucifixion within the time of Paul? Yes or no? Address the verse. Give me your interpretation.
I hate to tell you, but I mean, if you give me a few minutes to break your 20-second parameter, even though you're ranting, like a little girl, I can give you some commentaries from even Cambridge and Yale showing that this is not the interpretation that they hold, friend. Do you want that?
Not even.
It doesn't deny the crucifixion. Do you want that? I can do it for you.
Okay, so this is the issue.
I can do it. It'll take some time, but I can do it. I can pull them up for you, sweetheart.
Bless. This is
no, because earlier he was talking about.
Say I'm not. Say I'm not. Say I don't have the source right now.
Bless. You can just say Bless. You can just say you don't have the source right now, and you can just say you're agnostic. You don't need to say, "Oh, I can bring you this."
Oh no, I said he can give me a few minutes, and I can absolutely bring up the source. No problem. It's going to break his 20-second parameter.
I give you the verse and I give you a commentary. You can read the verse for yourself, and you can say I can come up with an inference based on what I can read. It's contemporary.
So Bless, you're conceding this question, and Abdulazeez, you can just move on to the next one instead of just hopping.
No, I'm not conceding the question by no means. I said if he wants to give me time, I can absolutely no problem.
We can pause.
No, you're conceding answering this question basically. That's
how am I conceding answering the question? You just said I can answer
it.
How does that mean conceding?
Because you're agnostic on it. Right now you're telling me I have this source.
No, I'm not agnostic on it. I just said if it breaks his 20-second parameter, because what he likes to do is rant for 2 minutes, ask me a question randomly, because he realizes he has to do because it's cross-examination, and that's what he does. I can do it for him if he gives me over 20 seconds. That's what I said. Not conceding the question.
So you're saying you want to answer it with more time later on. So you're conceding it right now in this section of the debate that you're not going to answer it.
No, he's not conceding it. He's saying he can bring. He has the answer. He's just saying he needs to. If you give him more time,
is he going to answer it now?
Bring it up. It's up to Abdulazeez and his cross-examination.
Okay, so you're not prepared.
You're not prepared
right now. You're not prepared right now. So you're not prepared right now. It's pretty simple.
No, it's up to him if he wants me to bring it up or not.
Bro, I'm not saying you can't. Bro, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Blessed, I'm not saying you can't answer the question. I understand you're saying you can, but I'm saying right now
you're conceding the wrong way, friend. You have to understand your definitions.
Look, if either you let Blessed, you could either let him give him more time so he can bring the source, or you can just say no, you can't have more time. But
if you want to move on, Abdulazeez, we can move on. If you want,
exactly. Can you just give me your interpretation? Can you just give me your interpretation of the verse just by reading it head on if you don't have anything prepared right now? You can read the
Off the top
verse.
of my head, no, I don't have everything off the top of my head because
Nothing,
working on
nothing.
a
So
major book.
we see a clear difference. We see two opposing views where Paul is saying you're bewitched. He's using strong terminology here, and he's saying you're bewitched, you foolish Galatians. And these are
No.
the people who are the Judaizers according to him as well. If you read the Galatians chapter 2, and these people are bewitched, and he says we publicly portray Jesus as crucified to you. You're bewitched. You're bewitched. We see have two opposing views here. You're not able to address it. We can move on to the next point. Okay. So in Matthew chapter 26, verse 26 to 20. Oh, yo, shake your head. No, but yo, I can go and
Yeah.
study that. I could go and study this, even though I
Absolutely
said you're
not.
good about the debate. Okay, anyways. So next question.
Without
Next question.
respect your time and mute.
So yeah, you best respect my time. Okay. So in the Gospel of John and chapter 19, verse 28 through 29, is Jesus drinking wine whenever he puts his head down, and they give him a gall from the vinegar, and then they let him drink wine from a
What
soaked
verse?
sponge?
What
John
verse?
chapter 19, verse 28 and 29.
What does that matter if he's drinking wine or not?
Do you believe is it yes or no? Is he
Are
drinking
you
wine?
talking about, do I think that's an authentic verse?
Yes. Do you believe that Jesus drunk wine when he was on the cross?
I don't know.
You don't know? All right, read the verse. Read the verse for us if you'd like. Okay.
It's
So you
possible.
just don't know. You're just like confused on the gospel narratives within what happened in Jesus' time. What are the last words that he said?
No.
What are the words that he said? What are the
No,
prophecies?
because
You don't know?
no, you're being dishonest. You're treating me like I just only take the gospels as like Christian documents by the word of God. I'm
Yeah,
not a
I'm going to fold
Christian.
your gospels.
I
I'm going
treat
to
the
fold your gospel
gospels as
narrative.
historical documents.
Okay. So are you a Bible believer?
I don't know what that means.
Do you believe in the Bible? Do you believe Jesus makes prophecies and these prophecies come and are fulfilled? Do you believe in like messianic prophecies and things like this?
Wouldn't this be a red herring or a
No,
whataboutism?
no. It's pertaining to I'm attacking your standpoint on the crucifixion, and it's a biblical view and a historical view and the Quranic view pertaining to the
No, it's
crucifixion. If
a
you conjecture and if there's issues with the Christian narrative pertaining to the crucifixion. So this is what you're doing. You're LARPing and you're messing around right now and you're wasting my time. Do you believe that Jesus drank wine when he was on the cross? Yes or no?
don't know historically.
Don't know history. So you Bro just threw his Bible completely under the bus and says, I don't know historically if Jesus drank the wine. So why are you appealing to the Gospels as a historical document if you're going to say, I don't know historically if Jesus drank wine when he was on the cross? What the hell is this?
Is that a
Okay.
question?
Anyways,
Or is that a
we're gonna do
rhetorical
this.
question?
I'm
I
gonna
need to
tell you.
know.
I'm gonna tell you. So yeah. Bro. It's based on it's doing an internal critique on the gospel narratives, and the gospel narratives how they completely fold themselves with all these internal contradictions within them pertaining to them. Okay. So if Jesus says in Matthew chapter 26 verse 29 that he will not drink of the vine until he's back in the heavens, and we see in John chapter 19, and this is Matthew 27 is when he's crucified. Matthew 27 verse 40 through 50, and we see in John chapter 19 it says that he drank from the gall of the vinegar. And then who do we have over here? We have C.K. Barrett right here. C.K. Barrett. I know. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with C.K. Barrett, where he says in the Gospel according to John, C.K. Barrett, an introduction with commentary and notes on the Greek text. Right here, he says in page 553, he says there's no point in trying to harmonize this passage with Jesus' Last Supper promise, not recorded by John, to drink no more wine until he should drink in the kingdom of God. So why does Jesus make a prophecy saying, I will not drink of the vine until I'm back in the heavens? But the one who was on the cross drank from the vine, right? And the second great treatise says the way you get out of this contradiction is if you appeal to the Gnostic literature that says it was Simon who drank from the gall of the vinegar, and it wasn't Jesus himself. Okay, so can you reconcile this contradiction, or is it just a plain contradiction within the text that completely folds your crucifixion narrative? Let's give him 20 seconds to answer.
This is a
Yeah,
question?
this is your question, and this is the last question.
All right, perfect. If you want to allow him the time, do you mind repeating that question? Because, like, no offense, Abdulazeez, but you ramble a lot, and then you ask the question. It's hard to keep up.
Jesus says in Matthew chapter 26, verse 29, he will not drink of the vine until he's back in the heavens. He will not drink of the vine until he's back in the heavens, meaning he will not drink alcohol until he's back in the heavens. This is a prophecy that he makes. This is something that he tells his believers, right? But the person who died on the cross drank from the gall of the vinegar, therefore saying that this would be a failed prophecy by Jesus, or we can say that it wasn't Jesus who was the one on the cross who drank from the gall of the vinegar. Which one do you want to pick your poison?
Not really necessarily sure about what you're bringing up here, but again, I'd like to say this has nothing to do with the historical event of the crucifixion of Christ.
Failed prophecy of Jesus or Jesus not on the cross? Which one? You either discredit Jesus as a prophet within the New Testament, or you say it wasn't him on the cross. Which one?
Again, you're arguing red herrings here.
Okay, we got stuttering. We didn't get any adjustment of this
No, I
contradiction.
never once stuttered
Okay.
here.
Go
You're not
ahead.
arguing the original point, which is the historical evidence for Jesus' crucifixion. You're running away from it.
Did you appeal to the Bible? Did you appeal to the Bible as a historical source?
As historical documents, absolutely.
Beautiful historical document. Does the Bible have fundamental contradictions, and I said this is why you can pick your poison.
Yes,
you can say
the Bible has
you can,
contradictions in
you
it.
can say I don't believe in
I'm
biblical
not an
inerrancy.
inerrantist.
Your contradiction. You can say I don't believe in biblical inerrancy.
Abdulazeez, can you stop?
Oh, stop crying, okay.
Yeah,
You're asking me questions and I give you time to respond. This is unfair.
Okay. Can you give your answer to the question one last time? And again, this is the last question because
failed
then we need
prophecy
to.
or Jesus not on the cross? Failed prophecy or
I mean,
Jesus
this
not
is the last question. This is just unfair. I wouldn't treat you like this way, and I'm not going to in my cross-examination. This is just pitiful.
Yeah, Abdulazeez, you gotta stop. You gotta stop over talking him. You gotta stop ad homing.
I asked him 3 times.
Squiddy, the ad homing has been on both parts, and we've been doing our best to stop it. So if he's not going to answer the question again, then we can move on to his cross-examination. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do refuse to answer a complex question.
Okay. You refuse to answer a complex question?
Something that yeah. So for example, if somebody says, "Have you like a question?"
No.
Palto.
Okay. I'm not gonna say anything.
No. You should just hear me out. If somebody says to you, "Have you stopped beating your wife yet?" or "Have you stopped beating your dog yet?" That's a complex question because regardless if you say yes or no, as you ask me if I'm going to answer yes or no, is a fallacious question to begin with.
I didn't give you a yes or no. I didn't give you a yes or no.
I didn't give you a yes or no.
I didn't give you a yes or no. I didn't give you a yes or no. Wait, I said
no. Earlier you gave me an and if
question about. He's a false prophet, or you say with someone else on the cross. It's very simple. Pick your poison. CK Barrett agrees with me, fool. Okay, let's go to your Q&A because, bro, you're clearly not ready for this debate. Oh, he's scared. You're talking about me in Christ-centered, and you're not even ready or prepared to debate anything.
Give me your question.
Hurry up. Is it Christ? Did Christ make a false prophecy here when he says, "I will not drink of the vine until I'm back in the heavens"? Or was it someone else on the cross? It's either he made a false prophecy, or it wasn't him on the cross, and it was Simon of Cyrene who was on the cross, and he's the one who drank from the gall of the vinegar, the wine.
It's also just possible that the gospel writers embellished the story. That's what it is.
Oh,
the gospel
writers
looked
into it indirectly.
Can you repeat that? Can you read that one more time, just for the clip?
I just said it once.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways.
Okay, hello.
Okay. Let's get back to it. Okay. Let's talk about Tacitus for the next 10 minutes. Let's talk about Tacitus and let's talk about Josephus.
Wait,
I really think people need to understand how ancient history works. Every account has polemics against them.
Okay, let's start his Q&A.
Yeah, start my Q&A. How long is my Q&A?
It's gonna be 15 minutes.
Perfect. I'll set my time.
Give me 2 seconds to get it back up.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Is this Q&A or cross-exam for?
It's cross-exam. It's cross-exam.
Yeah. All
right. 2 seconds. My bad. When you're ready, go right ahead, sir.
Sure. All right. Do you agree that every ancient historical document has a polemical, religious, or theological motive?
Yeah, most of the time, yes.
Okay. So would you also agree that majority to all of ancient historical documents are not infallible documents?
Of course.
Okay.
They're very fallible.
So why then are you arguing that, why are you committing the fallacy of composition then? If you're saying that if the Gospels err in something like a particular prophecy of Jesus, and therefore Jesus wasn't crucified, which is our conversation.
Okay, so can I respond with 20 seconds?
Course.
So if you're going to take the theological perspective, and if you're going to believe in biblical inerrancy,
no, real quick. I'm not talking theological. We're talking historical today, baby girl.
Yeah. So if the gospel, so if you say I don't believe, so if you say I believe Jesus made a false prophecy here, then I'd say okay, then fine, you can take your historical source. But I say that there's reconciliation with this, with other people saying it was Simon of Cyrene who was on the cross, and he was the one who was drinking from the gall of the vinegar. So I would say very simple, very simple.
Where's the first mention of somebody like Simon of Cyrene taking the cross that we have?
Okay, beautiful. In Irenaeus talks about people within his own time saying that the Basilidians.
What time period was Irenaeus writing?
Irenaeus was in the year 180, but Basilidians.
So would you agree that that's late 2nd, early 3rd century writing?
No, I wouldn't say this is doctrine. I would say this is a belief that was held by the earliest Christians. Why? Because Basilidians attributed to the
stop. I'm asking the questions, damn it. Your answer.
I didn't ask you a question. I
know, because it's my cross-examination. Somebody pause the time. I'm pausing the time. We're at 3:24. Pause it. We're gonna get this right. No, we're going to get this right.
Your face is red. Keep hitting that vape. Go ahead.
No, we're going to get this right. Okay? I ask the questions, you answer. I'm going to give you time to answer.
Of course.
But if you're done answering a question, I move on to the next one. There's no time for conjecture. I have a goal that I'm trying to reach. If you feel like I'm being dishonest, I'll stop. You can tell me why, and we can resettle. That's fine. but
Sure.
my time is my time.
Hurry up.
All right. So, you agree that the Gospels, like Greco-Roman works, obviously have contradictions. They err. They're not infallible works, right? So, why do you suppose that if the Gospels are wrong about a prophecy, then therefore you commit the fallacy of composition?
Okay. So not only was that wasn't my only argument, but right here I'm telling you to pick your poison. You either say Jesus made a false prophecy, therefore denigrating him and saying he was a false
You're
prophet,
not answering
or
my
a false god,
question.
or you say that he
You're
was
not
crucified.
answering my
Take the
question.
biblical view. I said it's fine. I said it's fine, Habibi. You
I'm
can take the
pausing the
biblical
time
view.
again. I'm
Obviously,
pausing the time,
I'm
bro.
telling you, I'm
Hold
answering
on,
your
hold
Bro,
on,
you're
hold
not,
on,
you're not
hold
gonna
on,
pause
hold
the time
on.
when you like because you don't like
This
my
is
answer. I'm giving you an
ridiculous.
actual answer. I'm
Okay,
giving you an
okay,
actual
sir. I can't lie. You can't pause time when you don't like his answer. He's going to
Yeah,
give
He's
yeah,
you
not.
yeah.
an
No, no,
Yeah,
it's
I don't
It's
not.
like
not
your
Hang
that.
answer. I
on.
don't like your answer. Leave me
Hang on.
alone.
It's
It's not
not
an
that.
It's not an answer. He's not giving an answer. He's avoiding the question.
He's
He's
avoiding the
avoiding the question.
question.
You're not
Squiddy,
answering,
Squiddy,
Abdulazeez.
stop crying, Squiddy, stop crying. So, Squiddy, am I not answering word for word that yes, the Gospels do portray Jesus as being crucified, but if you're going to take the view that Jesus is infallible within the Gospel narratives, then you're going to have to call him a false prophet. I want you to
No,
become a
blessed.
Muslim.
Nobody's
I want you
holding
to
to
become a
Abdulaziz,
Muslim.
it's not his.
I want you to concede your religion, fool. I want you
Abdulaziz,
to.
that's
No.
not his question. His question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, blessed.
Oh,
Are
yeah,
the
correct me if I'm wrong.
Gospels
Let him answer.
ancient Greco-Roman biographies? Are they reliable historical sources? Blessed, you could correct me, or you could correct whether or not that's your question, but that seems to be the case, right?
Yeah, I
No,
am bringing
I
down that
think
route. I'm showing that there are
This isn't the
every
question.
document in antiquity has errors in it. So to say that the gospel of errors, therefore, to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is the fallacy, called the fallacy of composition, is fallacious reasoning. And I'm asking why you're committing that, and you're running to a different point. So what I'm going to do is we have 12:44 left. I'm going to resume. We're going to continue this to play, regardless of how you have it, because I know
you
somebody's
don't control your own time. You don't control your own time. I control my own time.
One second. Just wait, guys. Just wait. So, blessed. I think I understood your question. Your question is, even if like the Gospels are historically inaccurate in some issues, that doesn't mean therefore the main picture that the Gospels gives is historically inaccurate. So you're saying that he's committing the fallacy of composition, right?
Okay.
Right, exactly. So Abdulaziz, the question he's asking you is just because there are like contradictions, like with the narratives in secondary details, for example, like who was with him on the cross, whether they spoke, what was the conversation, what were his last words, whether the women who were at the tomb, how many women, etc. These are all secondary details, but none of them dispute the overall point that Jesus was crucified on the cross. So he's asking you, how did you jump from there's issues in the secondary contradictions to therefore the overall narrative is unreliable? If I understood you correctly, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
And the
Beautiful. And I'm gonna answer the way I like, bless.
You got 20 seconds.
So
Go
if
for it.
yeah, beautiful. So if the Gospels, obviously, we're taking the Gospels as a historical source on your part, right? I'm taking other attestation on my part from all these other groups and from these church fathers and from other writings that deny the crucifix. But you can say, yes, the Gospels clearly portray Jesus as being crucified. No one's gonna argue with that. Obviously, the Gospels say that Jesus was crucified. Matthew chapter 27, verse 46, all over Mark, all over John, all over Luke, they all unanimously agree that Jesus was crucified, even though they're copying all off one another. And these Gospels are coming much later on than the time contemporary to the time of Jesus. But we can obviously infer from this
I'm
passage
sorry.
there's a
That's the
contradiction
20
here,
seconds.
and that you're
I
not gonna be
gotta
able to
cut in.
reconcile it.
I
Yeah,
gotta cut
that's
in.
fine.
I gotta
That's
cut
fine.
in.
That's fine.
I gotta cut in. I understand what you're saying, but again, but like you agreed earlier, what time period is Ignatius writing his writings?
The
These
106,
heresies.
106 with
180,
4 cities.
correct?
No,
Yes or
he doesn't
no?
have a book. He doesn't have a book against heresies. That's Irenaeus.
Oh, Irenaeus.
You,
Yeah.
yeah.
180, correct?
Yes, Irenaeus.
Right.
Yes.
So would you agree with me that is late 2nd to early 3rd century? Writing about somebody within that period.
Wait, why are you saying 3rd century? This is 2nd century. Yes, and Irenaeus is
Late
commenting on
2nd,
Christians.
early 3rd century. Yeah.
No, this is late 2nd.
All
Early
right,
3rd century. Early 3rd
you're
century.
arguing
Yeah,
semantics.
early 3rd
We'll go
century.
back to the main point.
Yeah. So
So
Irenaeus
again,
is commenting on Christian
why are
early
you
beliefs.
why do you think you're not committing the fallacy of composition with saying that the Gospels err on a few different points, therefore Jesus wasn't crucified?
That's not my point. My point is there's conjecture even within the New Testament documents and within the history. That's my point. If you don't understand this, then you're a fool. If you don't understand this, then you're a fool.
No. Time out. The issue is that the problem is that when you brought up the church fathers, because it's my time to speak, church fathers you gave for an argument against will be something that's deriving of a time period during the 2nd century, which I already argued for, right? So why are the Gospels not used as 1st century reliable documents of the historical Jesus when the earlier attestation documents to Jesus?
All right, beautiful. Because I think there's influence. Obviously, the Gospels have influence from Paul, and Paul's
Okay.
soteriology is the
But
one that
you right,
progresses.
okay,
So
fantastic. You
yeah,
answered the
so
question.
obviously,
You answered
yeah.
the
So
question. You answered the question.
you can say
What
your
is it?
belief.
No, you answered
Yeah,
the
I'm
question. You
answering.
answered the question.
I'm
You answered the
answering.
question. You answered the
Okay,
question.
okay, that's fine. That's fine.
What is yeah, you're wasting my time. Quit it.
Stop jittering.
So if you agree with me though that every single writing, like earlier, you already agree that every writing has polemical, theological, or philosophical motives in it. So why are you saying that because the Gospels have a religious, philosophical, and theological motive, and therefore they're unreliable? How are you getting to that conclusion?
All right, beautiful. Because if this is influenced by Pauline doctrine of salvation, and the Gospels need to portray Jesus as crucified for all of the laws to be fulfilled, for the redemption of the curse of the law to be redeemed, and for Jesus to die for our sins, then obviously this is a belief that's going to be portrayed within the Gospels if Paul is the one who's influencing all of this, right? So I'm going to say you have Paul, and I have every other group that denied the crucifix within the first and second century.
And I would argue that your groups that you've only showed are second and third century groups.
No, they're beliefs.
But now it's my time to speak. Stop it.
So you didn't address
close
Paul's
it off
congregation.
in your cross exam.
Yeah, but you didn't address Paul's
But
congregation.
but here's the funny part. It's my time to speak, so shut up. So here's another thing. Why do you think that atheists and non-Christians and Christians alike along the theological spectrum, to a unanimous consensus, agree that Christ was crucified historically?
Beautiful, because they're going to go over the naturalistic way of looking at history. So obviously,
what do you mean naturalistic?
obviously,
Can you explain that to
they're
me?
going to say Jesus. They're going to say that Jesus either died by natural causes, and they're not going to say that he was ascended into the heavens, because this is something that's
right. But Abdulazeez, time out. Wait, you're done answering. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing. Pause. I'm not doing this.
Stop crying, bro. I'm answering your
stop.
question. Stop crying.
Bless,
I'm not doing this.
Bless, you have the right to answer. Ask whatever question you want, and he has the right to answer however he wants. You can't like force him to answer the way you want.
But
right?
what he's doing is
if you want, Bless, I think if you want, like I can be an intermediary, so you can ask like what question you want, and I'll make sure to hold him to it. If that's what you want.
Because my problem is this: is that I'm answering a question. Either he's taking up a lot amount of time, or two, he's not answering the question I'm asking.
So I gave you 30 seconds.
I think the last question, just for Abdulazeez for a second, bro. So I think the question you asked is about historical analogy, right? So what do you mean by natural?
Why do all these historians?
Right. But you were specifically talking about them assuming naturalism, right? And you were asking him to explain that, right? So I think he was talking about the historical critical method and how scholars assume like the most plausible thing is usually the naturalistic explanation, right? So I think you're asking about that, correct?
And he's asking for my understanding. Why would I assume this? And he's only giving me 10 seconds before he's
I want Bless to just confirm that. Like, so what's your question about that specifically?
Yeah. No, it was because he's saying, well, it's a naturalistic event, and I'm curious why you're saying it has to be of course, a crucifixion is a naturalistic event. That's why I'm curious, like this naturalistic idea. That's why Christians and non-Christians are agreeing.
I'll address this, and I'll help you understand with with a better perspective. Okay, so looking at history, right? If people are saying that Jesus resurrected, scholars in today's day and age, atheists and secular scholars, are going to say these people were on shrooms. These people were hallucinating. They didn't actually see Jesus. Jesus didn't actually resurrect. So me and you both reject naturalistic ways of Jesus's lifestyle. We believe that Jesus ascended into the heavens, whether it was after his death or whether it was before his death. We both agree on this, right? When it comes to secular and atheist scholars, they're going to say, oh, the most plausible way that we can look at history is either Jesus died by way of stoning, like what the Jews claim in their Sanhedrin and their Talmud, or Jesus died by way of crucifixion, like what the Christians claim in their Gospels, or that Jesus died of old age. So they're going to come with these three interpretations, right? But you're the main.
It's been 20 seconds. It's been 20 seconds. I've given you 20 seconds. Like
there you go.
That did not answer my question.
I did answer your question. If you don't like the answer,
I'll re-answer it. If Tacitus Josephus and the Gospels are earliest attested sources, way before the Quran, the Epistle of Barnabas, or the second century developments of what Irenaeus talks about of these different heresies, why should we redefine a naturalistic event like a crucifixion to a miraculous or supernatural event?
Beautiful. So we believe that Jesus did miracles. We believe that Jesus ascended into the heavens. Why? Because we have attestation within the first century pertaining to these events. I have attestation from these Christian groups that say that Jesus only appeared to have suffered and that he ascended into the heavens and he wasn't harmed and he didn't die, right? So I have my attestation, you have yours. What we see is conjecture. We don't see a solidified fact within history that Jesus was crucified pertaining to us looking at this from a theological perspective.
So what evidence do you have, instead of, like, if you point to a scholar, can you give me their methodology, please, to say that these groups that Irenaeus is talking about in the late second century are early first century groups?
Yeah, so Ignatius. So this is very simple. So first of all, you keep going to Irenaeus. Irenaeus is in the year 180. I appeal to Ignatius, right? So you're getting these church fathers mixed up pretty simply.
My
Okay.
bad.
So
Ignatius.
Ignatius,
You know what I'm talking
Ignatius,
about.
beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. So Ignatius, both of them dealt with quote unquote heretics who were denying the crucifix. Both of them dealt with it. Okay, so it's pretty funny, right? Ignatius. So it just shows you conjecture galore, conjecture galore. But Ignatius is writing about these Christian groups. He tells us where they stem from. He told us their beliefs. He told us where they
You're not
came from.
answering my
He told us
question.
what they upheld.
Can you
I'm
show
telling
me
you,
where
I'm telling you,
where he
I'm
says
telling
that
you.
they're an early first century group?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So right here, so we're gonna read Ignatius' letter to Magnesians. Okay, this you can pause your time if you'd like, but don't pause it for too long. I'm pulling it up
Nope.
right.
I'm running my time. We're at 6:07.
Okay. So someone else needs to track his time and make sure he's not like cheating. Okay. So right here,
No,
letter to the
he is.
Magnesians.
He's fine.
Yeah, I know. He's like jittering. He like needs to get some like redemption. Okay.
No,
So
I
if
just need you to
therefore,
hurry up on this point because I'm
yeah,
going to give you about
stop
20
stuttering and let
seconds
me
and
read.
you're
I need
done.
you to stop stuttering. I need you to stop stuttering and let me read. Okay. If therefore those who were brought up in the ancient order of things have come to the possession of a new hope. So he comments on this group and he says, they have been brought from the ancient order of things and they have come to a possession of a new hope. Read the letter to Magnesians chapter 9. So he already pinpoints where these people are coming from and what they were upholding. What were they upholding? No longer observing the Sabbath, which the only inference that we can come to is that they were once observing the Sabbath. Who was observing the Sabbath? Who was upholding the Mosaic customs, traditions, and rituals? James and his congregation. And we see this from Acts chapter 21, verse 18 to 24, where they were still upholding Mosaic law, and they were living in obedience to the law, upholding Sabbath, upholding circumcision, upholding all these dietary restrictions and laws. So we know where these groups came from. We know what their
Okay.
theology
I
was.
got it. You've been talking for a minute. Hang on, stop. It's my time to speak. Stop. I asked you a question. You gave me the answer. You brought it up. So based off that passage, why do you say, like, what is the evidential line to propose over to say that the idea that he's talking about a group that is early first century instead of a group that was Christian that dived into Gnostic practices in the second century?
Beautiful, because he tells us of their views. He tells us of their views that they were upholding the Sabbath, so we know that they were Jewish Christians, right? When it comes
that would
to
agree with my critique, though, because I just said a group holding to first century Christian ideals, because even Gnostic Christians in the second and third century held to Christian practices. You're
going to consider any group.
So how is that a critique against what I'm presenting here?
So these are people who had Jewish Christian beliefs, and they come to Paul, or they come to Ignatius, and they accept Pauline Christianity, and he says they're still denying the death of Jesus.
Okay, so you agree Ignatius is within the late second century, correct?
You can make a killer argument from silence, right? But obviously what we can see is that Jewish Christians that he's dealing with denied the death of Jesus, like what he says word for word in the letter to the Magnesians chapter 9. Read it for yourself.
Nope, it's not a fallacious argument from silence by no means. Because again, as I reported, you haven't been able to argue against the Gospels yet, but we're going to move to something different. Let's do a Tacitus here. What evidence do you have that, why do you think Tacitus is gaining his information from a Christian source?
Beautiful.
Besides supporting and what you got?
Yeah, because he the Christians, because he's mocking the Christians, he's laughing at them. You think so? Like, I'm not asking you a question here, but just like kind of rhetorically.
I'm sorry. Right? How is that not? How is that not?
I'm answering your question. I'm answering your question, ma'am. I'm answering your question. Okay, like if you could let me respond. Okay, if you could let me respond, like let's hurry this up.
20 seconds. Go for it. I only got 3 minutes.
Beautiful. Because Tacitus is recording Christians who came up to him and he's mocking them for worshiping a God who received the ultimate punishment. You didn't know this?
Okay, time out. What is your evidence for that claim? That's a source.
Beautiful. Does he mock the Christians for worshiping a God who received the ultimate punishment?
I'm sorry, you're asking me a question by cross-examination. You got to give me. I'm asking you a question.
Yeah. I'm telling you. Does he mock the Christians? Or no, I'm not. I'm saying he obviously mocks the Christians for worshiping a God who has received the ultimate punishment, meaning that he dealt with Christians and he was trying to laugh at them and say, you worshiping a God who received supplicio, like what he says within his writings.
So Abdulazeez, real quick. So he dealt with Christians in an environment where Christians live, but how does that say? What evidence do you have to say he's getting that from like Christian hearsay?
This is Robert E. Van Vroos says, literally word for word.
But did I not point out? Right. But what evidence do you have? Right, time out. I mentioned this earlier in my opening.
Abdulazeez, you gotta let him respond. This is his cross-examination.
I'm answering his questions.
You're answering something. I'm going to respond. You could have done this during your cross-examination. You had every right to.
I'm reading a scholarly source to answer your question.
Right. But I pointed out with Van Voorst earlier that he contradicts himself with Meribera Serpion. So can you give me that? Can you give me Van Voorst's methodology and how he derives that conclusion?
Okay, beautiful. So we can read this paragraph right here in 1 second in his book Jesus Outside the New Testament: An Introduction to the Ancient Evidence, Robert E. Van Vroos, where he says the most likely source of Tacitus's information about Christ is Tacitus's own dealings with the Christians, directly or indirectly. While Tacitus does not, Tacitus does not speak. He does say the Tacitus in two periods of his life he could well have acquired a knowledge of them. The later period was that Tacitus was governor of the province of Asia. At the same time, his close friend Pliny the Younger was governor of the neighboring province of Pontus, Bithynia, and had difficult dealings with Christians. Right. So he's saying it could be correlated to Pliny the Younger and his belief on dealing with Christians as well. So everything that we see is just them dealing with Christians. And if he mocks them for worshiping a God who received the ultimate punishment, then we can obviously say that he had dealings with Christians and that he might have
I'm
gotten
sorry,
this idea
real
that
quick,
Christians
Abdulazeez, I only have a minute and 10 seconds left. I'm glad you answered that.
There you go.
Does he cite anything regarding of his methodology? Because that's not a methodology. He's just assuming things.
So he connected him to Pliny the Younger. He talked about how they were
Right,
governors.
but nobody in their right mind.
When
Great, but
Pliny
I
the
agree.
Younger was governor of the neighboring province of
Correct,
Pontus,
absolutely.
Bithynia,
But
and had
I'm
difficult
asking.
dealings with Christians, they directly
Stop.
had
I'm asking a
dealings with
question.
Christians.
I'm asking a
Yeah,
question.
I'm telling you. I'm answering you.
No,
I'm telling you.
you're
I answered your
not, because
question. You
I'm
keep
still
interrupting because
asking
you're
the
scared.
question.
I'm sorry you don't have to
Abdulazeez,
answer. I'm sorry you
I've
don't have
got
to answer.
43
You-
seconds left.
Okay.
Stop.
Longest 43 seconds of our lives. Go ahead.
Yeah, shut up. Make it
Yeah,
go by
stop sweating.
faster.
Stop sweating. Stop sweating. Wipe
So
off.
if it comes with Tacitus, for example, and you're saying that he's getting his sources from a Christian because of Pliny the Younger, what evidence do you have from that instead of causation equals correlation, which is a fallacy?
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So he says at the same time. So this is obviously like how scholars are gonna use their methodology by making inferences. So if they say Tacitus was close with the friend at the same time his close friend Pliny the Younger was governor of neighboring province of Pontus, Bithynia, and had a difficult dealings with Christians, then we can obviously infer that they would have had experience with Christians. When I say
that's not
that
how
he mocked
history works,
Christians
but
for
when time is
because they
done.
received the ultimate
time is
punishment.
done.
Time is done, but that's not how history works.
Time is done. The time is done. If I say I'm gonna conclude. If the Tacitus is dealing with Christians,
10 seconds.
according to every single scholar, and he mocks them for receiving the ultimate punishment, then we can only infer that yes, he had some experiences with Christians when he writes about them in his Annals 1544 and talks about where they were breaking up.
We're done, Abdulazeez. We're done. Made
There
your
you
point.
go.
You got
There
10
you go.
seconds in.
All right, so so you got concluding remarks now and then Q&A, right?
Yes, and
For
they're
sure.
both 5 minutes. Abdulazeez, I believe that you begin.
Okay, give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, no issue.
Thank you.
Well, this has been a lively debate.
Yeah, it has been. Right.
Okay.
Cora, you and I are debating next.
All right.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ready,
and then after
ready.
that, me and Squiddy are gonna debate.
Oh, wait, Squiddy, get another person and you and I versus Cora and me. Wait, you Cora and I versus you and somebody else.
Hazard, it's time. It's your time to shine.
Hazard? Bro, you guys are cooked. Wait.
Yeah.
Hazard, where are you, buddy? It's time to shine.
Ready when you are, Essay. 5 minutes.
Your turn.
Yeah. Yes, sir. 1 second.
Yeah, I'm talking to Essay, bro. I'm gonna get my time ready. I'm not talking to you.
All right, go ahead.
Beautiful. Okay. So as the Quran clearly says, the early people had ikhtilaf, difference of opinion pertaining to what happened to Christ. We see this historically. Blessed was unaware of these sources. Blessed was unaware of this, even though I've brought this up in debates him before. Seems like he wasn't well studied upon it. He doesn't even know that there was congregation and there was a conjecture in Ignatius's congregation, and even earlier than that in Paul's congregation, which scholarship agrees with me that yeah, Paul was dealing with people who undermined, downplayed, and even outright rejected the crucifixion. He had was never even informed of these verses. Never even informed of these verses. So as the Quran perfectly says, they had ikhtilaf. We see this historically. The Quran says that there was shak, that there was doubt in these peoples pertaining to what actually happened to Jesus. We see this historically. He says that they have no ilm, they have no knowledge pertaining to what actually happened to Christ. We see this historically. People were speaking based on dhan. Last, the Quran tells us they had dhan, conjecture, hearsay, and they were not getting their information from reliable sources. Every single thing within the Quran checks out. We went over at least 10 denial sources in the 1st and the 2nd century pertaining to Christians who would have had problems with the crucifix, or who would have outright denied it, or had a plethora of different theories saying that Jesus didn't die, that he only appeared to have suffered, that Simon of Cyrene was the one who was crucified instead, and other theories as well pertaining to who actually died on the cross and what actually happened and was it an illusionary nature or whatever. We see conjecture galore. So the Quran narrative is perfect in this, and we see that this is what I was trying to prove. This is the hole that I was trying to poke, and I poked it to a perfection. Because when I say that the Islamic belief about Jesus was there in the first century, and I get you to concede on it in our rebuttal, that the belief that people denied the death of Jesus and that he only appeared to have suffered, وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ, within the Quran, word for word, that they believe that Jesus wasn't killed or crucified, he only appeared so to them. It only appeared so to them, right? If we see this belief within the first century, then I can say, yes, the Islamic belief is there within the first century. And if I can correlate it, and if I can say that these are Jewish Christians, which scholarship agrees with me, like Maddie Milkowski, which I put in the side chat, then I can say, yes, I have a very strong argument that early Christians denied the crucifix, all pertaining to my argument that is historically we have conjecture on the crucifix and not a solidified fact within history that Jesus was crucified if we look at it from a theological perspective, right? Very, very simple, okay? So when it comes to this idea of Yahweh coming and passing through a birth canal and being horribly tortured and whipped and lashed and disfigured and dishonored by his own creation to forgive his creation, this is mythology. This is paganism. This is Greco-Romanization and mythologization and paganized idea and interpretation of Christ and who the Messiah would be, right? There's no substitution of vicarious man God atonement. Boo-hoo. Like, sorry to burst your bubble. But these early Jewish Christians didn't believe in a soteriological interpretation of the cross as well, which is what the Muslims believe. We say, hell no, there's no way in hell anyone should believe that a man died on the cross for the sins of humanity. I don't give a rat's ass if that's what you're going to die upon, right? Like, it's clear this is against like the innate disposition that humans have, right? We went over the Gospels. We went over the lack of attestation pertaining to these Gospels in the first century. Nothing to them. Year 180, we got Irenaeus of Lyon. So he keeps arguing Irenaeus of Lyon's the second century, late second century. Irenaeus of the Lyons is the first person to say these Gospels, Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, and attributes them to their authors. He's the first person we have historically. Papias, you didn't want to challenge me on that. Boo-hoo, right? Papias, throw him to the side, right? What we have historically, conjecture, hearsay, dhan, shak, doubt, and no ilm regarding these events. The Quranic narrative is proved to a T within the first century. And we got you to concede on this, right? Gospel narratives, weak, paganized idea and interpretation of Christ. That's all there within the Gospels. They take from that of Mithras, Attis, Dionysius. I don't even have to say it myself. I don't even have to come up with some theory or some correlation equals causation. Justin Martyr says it for me. That these ideas and beliefs pertaining to the offspring of God being the word or the logos or the wisdom of God and him dying and resurrecting and ascending into the heavens, we propagate nothing new or different from what you pagans believe regarding the sons of Jupiter. This belief of a mythological man, God Savior, who comes and dies for the sins of humanity and introduces all these customs and traditions. This comes from paganized beliefs that came prior, right? So we don't have anything that rooted within the Abrahamics to say that God-man comes down and dies for the sins of humanity, right? I'd love to debate you on messianic prophecies pertaining to this, but it doesn't seem like you're that informed on scripture. How much time do I have left?
You have 54 seconds.
Beautiful. So all I had to do was bring up scholarship from his side point, right? Josephus, Testimonium Flavinium, weak, forgery, interpolated by Eusebius. 8 Christian writers never mentioned it. Why wouldn't they have mentioned it? Why would they not mention it? Testimonium Flavinium has very, very good things pertaining to Christ, speaks highly of Christ, talks about his death and resurrection, talks about him being crucified under Pontius Pilate. Why would they not mention this? Why wouldn't Origen mention this? Why wouldn't any of these writers, 8 Christian writers prior to Eusebius, why wouldn't they mention it? And 4 writers after Eusebius not mention it at all, right? Tacitus, we can show that around the year 120 where he's writing about this, where he's writing about the Christians and where they're escaping and where they're fleeing, and he mocks them for worshiping a God who received the ultimate punishment. Obviously, he's getting this inference about Jesus dying on the cross, not from Roman records. If you can show that he took from Pontius Pilate or any Roman records pertaining to Jesus dying, if you could prove that, then that would have been good for you, but you weren't able to prove that. And I have all of the proof on my side when he was mocking these people. Suetonis, Marabar Serapion Thales, Suetonis, all these guys, Jewish sources say that Jesus died by way of stoning, so it doesn't help you there. All these guys are weak.
Time.
Throw them out the trash. It's conjecture. It's not a historical fact. Very simple. I need to go in like literally 6 minutes, so hurry it up.
Okay. Wow. All right, I'll start. I'll start right now. Yeah. Just to bring up, my opponent apparently was more worried about debating Christianity instead of the historical Jesus. One, he'd never once denounced anything about Tacitus or Josephus. He just said it's a forgery. The scholars like Van Voorsey brought up is what I brought up in my opening, is saying that he's just going to bring up scholars that bring up the scholars' methodology to see if we can actually figure out if the scholars are making a good claim instead of just making an assumption. So, for example, you brought up the whole Josephus thing, and you're saying that it's completely a forgery and created by Eusebius. this idea that is created by Eusebius was done by Paul Hopper and Ken Olson in Josephine scholarship, and even Alice Wheatley and Sabrina Ann Wallach in the Blackwell Companion to Josephus in 2021 point out that this has not gained any steam in scholarship. So again, you throwing the baby out with the bathwater, this logic, this fallacy of composition thing you keep doing is unfortunate. I'd say the next point that you keep doing is one, earlier I find it funny, and you can play back the tape, you agree that the Gospels and Paul agree that Christ was crucified, but yet you still argue against them to say that Christ wasn't crucified. I don't feel like you can have your cake and eat it too there. And so when we see the Gospels and the pre-New Testament traditions and the New Testament and the Pauline epistles all agreeing that Christ was crucified, and Josephus and Tacitus, which you didn't have much argument over, your only argument for Tacitus seemed to be that, well, I mean, Van Voorst says X, so therefore Y, but I pointed out very much why we can't use Van Voorst on that point. You seem to run up a whole bunch of different scholars like Christopher M. Tuckett and others on your different points, C.K. Barrett. I find it hilarious because all of them agree Christ was crucified. So unfortunately, I think you're doing something called Frankenstein an argument, which is what Richard Carrier does, who's a Jesus mythicist, who believes Jesus didn't exist. But what he does is he gains particular points of scholarship and puts them together and makes a Frankenstein argument, even though they don't agree with them in the whole. So no, I don't think you haven't presented much here, Abdulazeez. You haven't argued much against what I've said, and you've only used really fallacious tactic reasoning like rapid fire, which you talk more like Eminem on Rap God, and it's hard to keep up with all your points, and anyone that's been listening to this debate understands that. And also, when I have my cross-examination, you have this idea to want to debate with me through a cross-examination, which I see as dishonest. When I asked you questions, didn't answer it to the fullest capability that I know you could. And so, yeah, I think I did my part here in this debate. But you didn't answer the objections to the main sources, and I think you have a disconnect of how ancient history works. Your idea is that documents are removed decades away, or we don't know an exact source of something, so therefore it's unreliable. I mean, that's just a misunderstanding of how ancient history works. Majority of ancient history events or documents about an event are removed decades later, and also you don't get the exact source where you can cite source it like if you were in a modern day book. So that's it.
All right, great. Let's open up to Q&A. Is that right?
Do you mind if I ask the first question?
Yeah, I was gonna say I wanted to ask a question too, to be honest. So I think Squiddy, you can go first, and then I'll ask it after you.
Cool.
But first and foremost, Abdulazeez, how much time do you have?
Just let me make a phone call real quick, and then I'll be here for the Q&A.
Would that be okay with you, Blessed? If you can, do you have like?
Well, just let me do my 5 minutes, and I'll dip out.
All right.
So wait, do you want Bless to go first with the Q&A, and then?
Yeah, then that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
So then I guess I'll ask Bless first.
Yeah, and Muslims, if you'd like to like request up and ask him a question, please do so and tag me or Leafy in the side chat or Cora.
Right. So Blessed. Yeah, so Bless, my question to you is about the Q source, right? So as we know, like in Mark's gospel, the long you have the long ending and the short ending, and the short ending is the one that's original. And scholars say that, for example, that the Q source would likely not have included the passion narrative or confirm Jesus's death, which likely shows that. I'll just quote to you from some scholars. So, for example, Burton L. Mack, he says in his book, The Lost Gospel, he says the Q document ends without any reference to trial, death, or resurrection of Jesus Christ. This absence strongly suggests that the earliest form framers of Q, Jesus' execution was either unknown or deemed theologically irrelevant. It is plausible that in this circle, the crucifixion simply did not figure as a redemptive event. And then other scholars also make this point. So my question to you, if the earlier source, like the earlier we go back in time, right? Because we know that Mark, Luke, and Matthew are a product of Mark, and that John comes much later. But if the earlier we go back, the closer we get to the historical Jesus, we see that it's actually more in line with what Abdulazeez is saying, in that the crucifixion is not what is the main focus of Christianity, and it's not what's actually focused on. So I would just say, how would you respond to that claim that the earlier you go in?
I'd say your argument there is championed by Burton Mack. And if you remember in my opening, I said a lot of this argument is just going to be scholars championing other scholars. So you mentioned Burton Mack on the point of Q, that it doesn't mention a crucifixion or resurrection narrative, therefore that means something important. Well, N.T. Wright, who is in the Oxford Research Faculty, the special faculty for religious studies, he talks about that if you were to conclude something like that, it would be about as reliable as you walking to a maze without a map. And so I can give you the quote where he says that kind of idea and reasoning is not reliable. And so this is why many times I said throughout the debate, if we're going to make claims about things, let's come to the methodology of how we're deriving that claim and not just a scholar saying something. Because Burton Mack will disagree right with N.T. Wright, and in Leafy, with all due respect, me and you with something of a question to that parameter of Q, we're not going to get that answer.
No, I understand. So I can recognize that, for example, like what we say about Q is like steeped in mystery, and there's a lot of like we're going like you said, it's a stab in the dark. But what I'm saying that with the information that we have now, inductively, it seems to be the case that this tradition has evolved over time. So, for example, when you say that we have multiple independent sources, all attesting to this historical fact that Jesus was crucified, I would say that's a bit misleading, because in reality, Luke is just copying Mark. Matthew is also just copying Mark, and Mark is just copying Q. So in reality, it's not like
do you remember what I said in my beginning? That the gospel is genre of Greco-Roman biography.
No, I understand that.
Right.
I understand
by
that.
definition, a biography has to have prior information. So if anything, if Luke, that is quite reliable in over 70 plus different points throughout his work, as Colin Himmer points out, and he's using Mark as a source, it tells us something about Mark's reliability.
Not really, because what you have to do is look at Mark independently of Luke and Luke independently of Mark, instead of mashing them together and pretending they say the same thing.
No. That's the old 19th and 20th century like German criticism way of looking at it. That's not how it's looked at today.
Yeah, but in reality, you would agree that Mark gets like geographical places wrong, and that Mark's history is basically steeped in his theology. His history is secondary, and the same thing with Luke. He makes lots of historical errors, like for example the famous one about the census. And you can go through Matthew and look at the historical errors that he makes. But like you said, that's the fallacy of composition to say that therefore because there's these historical inaccuracies, the overall point is
you said a lot. Then you just mentioned the census. Luke is probably the most reliable out of the Gospels, and he gets way more things right than he does wrong throughout. If you check him.
I'm not disagreeing. Yeah,
I know, but you said most though.
Yeah, but
you may not realize, but you said he was wrong about most. Be careful.
Oh, fine. Then I take that back. But my point is that just because he's right about some things doesn't mean we can take for granted that he's right about other things. Every claim has to be examined on its own merits. Wouldn't you agree with
that? To a certain degree, this is where you have something called background author probability, right? So, for example,
exactly.
Right. So if let's say Luke gets things wrong, he gets things right, but let's say he gets things more right than he does wrong. When there's things where we're agnostic on the issue, we give him the benefit of the doubt. What happens?
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I wouldn't give him the
benefit of the doubt. I
would just be agnostic.
Right, but then the conversation switches from but then the conversation switches from was Jesus Christ historically crucified to a conversation of how ancient history operates.
No, it would still be the same question. It would just be under that overall title of what. No, I'll explain to you. So under that big title of was Jesus Christ crucified, we would just go through, okay, well, what are the sources that say he was crucified, and what is the reliability of each claim in these sources, and how accurately can we trust them?
Right.
And in the case of Luke,
Leafy.
Yeah, go ahead.
If ancient history agrees that like you don't have to cite your source exactly, a source can be decades later removed. A source can have only a handful of manuscripts 7th or 8th century later and still reliable, then you're dealing with history to say it's unreliable. It's a historical methodology question, not the documents we're dealing with.
I'm not. Here's the thing with me. Like, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just more in the way you use these arguments to support your point. Because, for example, like when you say the sources can be later removed, I have no problem granting that. That, for example, like the earliest like tale that we have, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the manuscripts we have for that are like centuries later. That doesn't mean that it's not reliable.
The Gospels are written within living witnesses.
No, they're not. They're written decades after the fact by highly literate Greek-speaking Christians.
Living witnesses.
None of them are eyewitnesses. Yeah, none of them are eyewitnesses.
I thought other people were supposed to have questions.
Yeah, sure, no problem. But I think
like you've asked, we're just going into back and forth here. We're starting to have a debate.
Fine. Yeah, that's fine.
No offense, I don't think you're bringing up many good objections.
Okay. All right. All right. Bang, you wanted to come up. Did you have a question?
I'm back. If anyone wants to ask me a question.
Yeah. I had a question for Abdulazeez. So
okay.
Okay, Squiddy, go right ahead.
And I like to. Since it seemed like Leafy was grilling Blessed a little bit. Am I
I
able to
don't know.
grill Abdulazeez a little bit since
You're not gonna
I
grill
was there?
shit, bro. You're not gonna grill shit.
Wait,
All right,
hold on.
well, let's see. So
Can
Abdulazeez,
I, Bang, did you have a question?
so
Yes or no?
No,
yeah,
no.
okay, so
Okay.
yeah, so Abdulazeez, this is my question. So I wanted to ask about something that Blessed already brought up.
The
Why do you
creed.
prioritize late 2nd century sources which reject the crucifixion over the multiple independent sources we have for the crucifixion? Josephus, Tacitus, the 4 Gospels, the New Testament writings, including the pre-Pauline Creed of 1 Corinthians 15, which according to James D.G. Dunn and other scholars dates within months of the crucifixion, but at most a few years, and according to scholars like Larry Hurtado and many others who say it goes back to the Jerusalem church. Why do you prioritize late 2nd century sources over the early 1st century evidence?
So firsthand, Squiddy, I've gotten you to concede, and wallahi, I remember this. I've gotten you to concede that there was Jewish Christians within the 1st century who denied the crucifix, right? Obviously, if you're saying late 2nd century, you're saying Irenaeus. Bro, we've debated this 4 times. Ignatius' congregation is dealing with Jewish Christians who
Blessed
rejected
already
the
showed you, and I've showed you multiple times.
Would have been what did Blessed address? Blessed didn't address shit. Okay, so let me continue completely
No, I did.
folding
You just didn't
on this
hear.
idea. Bless,
Bless,
this
just let him.
isn't you. This isn't you, Bless.
Just
This
go on
isn't
mute,
you.
bro.
This isn't you. Just go
He's
back to
asking you a
painting your
question.
nails.
Well,
Go
don't
back
let
to
him talk
painting your
about
nails.
me.
Go back to
No,
painting
he
your
can.
nails. Go back to painting your nails. Yes. So if Squiddy's gonna bring you up, and say, Blessed addressed you on this, I'm gonna say, no, Blessed did not address me on this. That doesn't mean that you can cut in, okay? So respectfully shut up.
Checkmate. I
Okay.
got you on
So
the next
Squiddy, yeah, no problem. Keep painting them nails. Okay. So Squiddy, when it comes to the gospel narratives, I can show you, and you hold to biblical inerrancy. I can show you the internal contradictions between the gospel narratives, and I can even show that Paul had problems with people who denied the
Right,
crucifix,
but
who would have been
that's
bewitched
irrelevant to
according
the
to him.
point. Even
And
if
I
I
know
grant
it is relevant to the question.
that's
It is
irrelevant to
relevant to the
using the gospel.
Even within these writings that you're holding to the primary objective standard, there's a lot of issues and contentions with saying that these are accurate, reliable sources pertaining to Jesus's life, ministry, and the crucifixion, and resurrection of his life. Okay, we have people even in obviously as time goes on, everyone's going to reject their proto-orthodox views. They're going to reject it, and they're going to back project it onto the earliest Christians. So they're going to try and portray this narrative that all the earliest
wait,
Christians,
hang on. So but you made the
under
claim that okay,
Pilate.
these
No claim.
the gospels contain
Yeah,
the gospels
yeah.
contain
But do
unreliable.
I have scholarship? So wait, real quick, to attack the creed. Do I have scholarship that says that the earliest Jewish Christians did not take a soteriological interpretation of the Jesus being crucified on the cross, and this is more of the Paul's Hellenistic ways, where he formulates this creed?
If
And
source
even then, I can say this creed. The scholars are going to say, yeah, that Paul mentions this creed, but they're not going to say where Paul got it from. They're not going to say who Paul got it from. They're not going to say anyone else was reiterating.
They don't need to know the exact details
and they're
to
not going to
know
say
that it goes back to the Jerusalem church.
Okay, so
Just in the interest of moderation, you guys, just in the interest of moderation, Squiddy, Squiddy, you can ask a question and Abdulazeez can answer however he wants, but just this back and forth is not going to be a problem.
And I was gonna wait, Squiddy, to be fair to you, because there was a back and forth that I allowed between Blessed and Leafy. I was gonna let it hit till 9. So
yeah, beautiful. Okay,
I'll just.
Squiddy, you mentioned Tacitus, Josephus, Marabar Serpion, Thales, and Suetonius, and all these guys. I already eliminated all these guys. Christian scholarship eliminates all these guys. Christian apologists eliminate these guys like Michael Kona. Okay, I already went over this. We already went over the numerous problems and issues with saying that these are primary sources pertaining to the life and ministry of Jesus and the death and the death and or resurrection. If you're taking Josephus's quote unquote authentic writings, which is an interpolation, you have to appeal to interpolated writings.
That's all, again, scholars don't believe, and I've exposed you on this multiple times on the disease.
So it wouldn't wait. Bro, I'm dealing with your claim. So you're saying I'm rejecting all these things. I'm telling you why I rejected all these.
You're gish galloping though. You're making like a bunch of
okay. Again, I'm not here for a back and forth. I gave it to you guys. Would you like to give the question? Give me 20
seconds. I'll just ask this, and then Abdulazeez can respond briefly, but he keeps yapping. So I'm just gonna ask. Okay, Abdulazeez.
Bro, you're the king of yapping. Please, come on, let's see.
Dude, he literally just keeps talking. I'm not even allowed to ask. Okay, so Abdulazeez.
Squiddy, you're gonna shut up right now, okay? You asked me about Suetonius, you asked me about Josephus and Tacitus, you asked me about Paul's writings, and you asked me about the Gospels. You asked me about these 4 things. When I started addressing these one by one, you say, "Oh, you're gish galloping." I said, I already have scholarship that rejects the sociological interpretation that these early Christians would have had from deriving from the cross. That goes and combats your idea of this creed that scholars laugh at if you say it's a couple months after. They say most likely it was
James D.G. Dunn. James D.G. Dunn says it. So.
Okay, Squiddy, this isn't a back and forth.
Okay, but why is he just he's not even answering anything?
I'm answering, dumbass. I'm showing you why I don't trust it. Why I don't think
Please
Jesus
refrain
Christ
from
is-
that
I'm
language.
showing you
Come
that's
on,
only
Abdulazeez,
conjecture.
bro.
Okay. My bad. My bad. My bad. Dummy,
Okay.
dummy.
Is there? Wait. Okay. Servant went down. That's fine. Is there a Muslim that had a question for blessed? I don't think so. Oh wait, yes, there was. Hold on. Penguin, if you're here, can you restate your question in side chat? If you're not here, then my bad.
Let me call upon someone. After that, let's get Schizoid up here. If he wants
He
to.
does. He's not. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, so I can appeal to Schizoid. I want to hear him cook. And Bless
He at least has
you
to like
haven't done
live.
yet, Abdulazeez.
If Bless wants to pin
Okay, here we go.
Ask me a question. That's perfectly fine.
Why is Squiddy still muted?
He's not. Oh wait, he
Yes,
is.
he is.
There you go.
Okay, thank you so much for meeting me.
No problem. You want to paint your nails with your boyfriend over here, Bless?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a better argument than you can come up with.
Okay, yeah. Like, why are you deifying me, bro? Why are you calling me a god?
Guys, we don't need this. We don't need this, guys. This is not like relevant. There's Mugli. He has a question for Christians.
Yeah, Hazard.
Do you
Hazard
want me
has
to
a
bring him
question
up?
actually for.
That's a question.
Yeah, but he hasn't requested. He hasn't requested to come up.
Has his hand up.
Let me bring him up. But I just answered a question, so let's do one for Blessed, and then we can do one for me as well.
But there are no Muslims requesting. But
Is Abdullah? Yes, Schizoid, do you want to come up and make a
oh
point?
wait, okay. Penguin has a question. Which prophets? Wait, what?
Yeah, because I basically
make sure it's pertaining to the
I'm not
crucifixion.
answering that. I'm not asking
Make
that
sure it's
question.
make sure it's pertaining to the crucifixion. Make sure it's like on top.
I'm not.
Yeah. Make sure it pertains to the crucifixion. Something that Abdulazeez couldn't do half the time.
I did like the entirety of it. Everything was related to crucifixion.
Bless, please, don't just like get into meta, bro. Just like,
no, Leafy. He
stick to the
doesn't get to make sly remarks to me during the entire debate and even on the Q&A.
Wait, you did as well. Wait, you did as well.
You did from the very beginning.
No, guys, stop.
Court.
Hi, Leafy. Your mic is
Right,
okay.
Bless, but please.
Yeah, just be consistent with your moderation. Mute him next time he does it.
I did.
Don't play favors.
I did.
We literally did.
Yeah, literally.
You should have known better than that, Blessed. You already knew better than that. Come on.
I should have known. I'm in a Muslim server.
Courtney, are you here for a valid question, or are you here to
I have a
as
valid question for Abdulazeez.
All right, then let's hear it.
Okay. Hi again, Abdulazeez. Listen, okay.
Abdulazeez.
Whatever. Anyways,
well, then would you like us to call you Bortney? Because then that's
that works. Either way.
Anyways. Okay.
Anyways, either way. So Abdul for short. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have noticed, is that Blessed's, and there's a question, I promise. Blessed's whole argument here is that Jesus existed. He was a real person. He was crucified on the cross. He's not a Christian. He's not arguing for the deity of Christ. He's not arguing for prophecy. He's not arguing for the infallibility of the Bible. So can you give us any kind of proof, any kind of sources that proves that Jesus, the historical person that everyone agrees existed, was not crucified?
Beautiful.
W question.
Courtney, very, very simple. Yeah, W question that you answered like 10 times within the debate. Okay, so Courtney, we both believe that Jesus ascended into the heavens. Why? Because we go by our books and we go by attestation within the first century. We have attestation that Jesus did miracles. We have attestation that Jesus cured the blind. We have attestation that Jesus raised the dead. We have attestation that Jesus rose to the heavens, right? Whether it's before his death or after his quote unquote death, that's what's in conjecture. That's what we're arguing. That's what we're debating. So when we have Christians, all galore, a plethora of different Christian groups who all trace themselves back to Christ, who all supposedly claim apostolic succession, right? Even from their side, from what they're going to appeal to, right? Who all say different things pertaining to what actually happened on that cross, what actually happened that day, pertaining to who died. Maybe it was Simon of Cyrene, maybe it was Judas of Iscariot, maybe it was Jesus of Barabbas, maybe it was Jesus only appeared to have suffered and it was an illusionary nature. Maybe it was some sort of spiritual or angelic figure, and the Docetists believed that he was that he had no human body, that he couldn't deal with that he couldn't go through any bodily harm, right? This is what we have. We have conjecture galore. The Quran says that there was conjecture. The Quran says that they were following dhan, conjecture,
I have a better
hearsay.
question
People
because
denied the
I
death.
think
You're not gonna ask two questions. I'm sorry, Ritney. You're not gonna ask two questions, okay? So you're just
crazy.
gonna yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Like
But if
why
you're allowed
it's
to
like,
answer,
why
but go
people
off,
ask
if you're
why
allowed to go
people
off
ask
topic with your
two
answer,
questions?
why is she not
Yeah,
allowed to
yeah.
ask multiple questions?
Wait, Squiddy. So
What?
she's saying, do we have any evidence? Do we have any evidence that people would have been rejecting the crucifixion? What am I going over right now? Different groups that did believe different things
Not
pertaining to
evidence in the first century
and
of
that
people
denied it, and
rejecting
that
the
proves the
crucifixion.
Quranic narrative. That proves the Quranic narrative that people had conjecture pertaining to the crucifixion. So Squiddy, like, just because you don't like the answer because it utterly refutes them doesn't mean you have to like meet right. Okay, so just shut now and like know your place, bro. Okay, so anyone else? Many groups denying the crucifix, denying the death of Jesus, agreeing with the Quran that he only appeared to have suffered. That's my reasoning for why I can say that it's historically justified to say that Jesus did not die and that he only appeared to have suffered. Christians were saying in the first century. Yeah, that's you, me writing. That's you gobbling up blessed.
I wish I could live the way you do,
You're doing
living
too
with a
much.
lie.
Seth. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question.
I'm holding it inside today. Like, bruh. Okay, Seth, go ahead. Who's your question towards?
Blessed. I have a question for him.
Okay, go ahead.
Blessed. So I told you after the debate I'll come. How does it feel to get actually molested intellectually?
Okay.
No, by no means. I fucking smacked this kid back and forth, bro.
All right.
By no means.
All right.
I was still waiting for an intellectual argument. We're over an hour after the debate. I'm still not gonna get one.
Okay, Bless. Okay.
I'm answering his question. He asked an honest question. I'm giving an honest answer. I didn't realize today I was debating a fucking moron. I thought this would be worth better of my time.
I can't stand men.
My apologies.
You guys hurt my head.
Unfortunate.
Just hit that vape. Just hit that vape, bro, and calm down. It's okay.
Well, okay. Abdullah, you have a valid question, please?
Can we guys?
Yes, I do have a question.
Let's get an actual question for Bless. Go ahead, Abdullah.
It's for the Christians,
I love how
anyways.
I keep getting muted, even though Abdulazeez keeps talking as well.
What?
So, anyways, I don't care who answers my question. But I have two questions. Am I allowed to ask two questions or just one?
That's fine, actually. But if you have like, if you have a question towards me or towards Bless, then you can like just tell me. You're saying it's to anyone?
It's any Christian.
Okay, so this would be towards Blessed. Okay. Ask your
Squiddy's out.
question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and it's one question, please, because we've stuck to that for others.
Yes.
Okay.
So, what is first of all, just to know if my question is valid towards you, who's Paul to you? What do you believe he is? Is he an apostle or what?
This has nothing to do with the conversation of Jesus' crucifixion, boss.
He is one of the first. He's the first person to report Jesus.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Abdulazeez, let him answer.
I'm simply talking about the historical evidence for Jesus' crucifixion, not some weird thing about some theological presumption that Abdulazeez keeps talking about.
Bless. I know it's hard for you to say, but like it's not up to you to decide what's relevant and what's not. If he's asking about,
it is
Paul,
when it's a
Paul's
debate topic we're agreeing on, and the historical.
Bless. When he's asking about Paul, bless. When he's asking about Paul, and Paul is one of the earliest sources that talks about the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, he's in his right to ask about Paul and your thoughts about Paul. Okay, so answer the question, please.
And I didn't get to the question.
I thought you said Jesus.
No. Paul. What is Paul?
Yeah, Paul. Yeah. He was an apostle. Yeah.
So he receives revelation from God?
He was a persecutor of the Christians, and then he was accepted into the Christian domain after his road to Damascus.
But did he see Jesus, and Jesus talked to him about the core beliefs of the Christian faith
on the road
in his
to
way to
Damascus? Yes, but this has nothing to do with crucifixion. But yes, he did.
Yeah, but what is the proof that he is?
What is the proof?
Or he did? Yeah, the proof that he saw
accepted
Jesus.
early on in the early church as a founding member, even though he was one that persecuted against that group.
No scholar would say that.
I'm sorry, Abdulazeez. I didn't know the question was to you.
Yeah, Abdullah. So you asked multiple questions. Okay, so please just limit it to one.
No, it's this one. It's what is the proof of Paul? But I needed to know if he believes that Paul is an apostle. It's not a multiple question.
The proof of Paul is going to be the Pauline epistles and his connection with Peter and James, and even the early church. You could call it a criterion of embarrassment. is how the early church even documents that Peter and Paul had a back and forth on circumcision, but Paul was still accepted in the early church. So we have even like positive and negative correspondences to his background of like who he was to be.
I mean, that reason can work to you, but it's not gonna work to a disbeliever like me.
Okay, I have
Right.
to
It's typically an internal reason.
Last thing. I know. It's okay if I can. Right.
Yeah,
I just want to say one thing, if that's okay, and it's not gonna take long. It's not anything bad. I would just say what I'm trying to deal with is the documents of the Gospels and the Pauline epistles as historical documents. I'm not interested into the Christian tradition. I'm interested into the historicity. That's what this conversation is about.
That's fine. So I'm going to bring up another Christian to give a question for Abdulazeez. So Katsa, I'm going to cut you off.
There's one right here. There's one right here.
There's another one I said I'll bring up as well. So Abdulazeez, if he wouldn't mind, he wouldn't mind answering both.
Wait, Dizzy's first. He's been sitting here.
Is it Dizzy or Kasuka?
Yeah, this is first. Yeah, this is first, then Katsa.
Yeah. Okay. I have a short question for Abdulazeez. It seems to me that one of your major objectives for this debate was showing that there were early first century Christians who denied the crucifixion of Jesus. And from what I heard, the sources you used were Galatians and then Ignatius, and then a collection of sources from the Nag Hammadi library, so 2nd, 3rd century. So I have a question about your earliest one, Galatians. And you used Galatians chapter 3, verse 1, which says, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you, that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed among you as crucified." It seemed that your point with this verse was that it shows that there were Galatians who apparently didn't think he was crucified. But personally, I'm not seeing it. It seems like Paul is more so saying, guys, you've literally seen Christ crucified, and yet you're denying the significance of that work and getting justification by works of the law. So I wonder, what do you think about that? Like, why do you see Galatians 3:1 in the way you do?
Beautiful. Now I'll address your question, Lucerna. Dizzy. Okay, so when it comes to Galatians chapter 3, verse 1, we see, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Didn't we publicly portray Jesus as crucified to you?" So Paul is saying, we've been preaching to you Christ crucified. Who has bewitched you? So we can say there's two opposing views here. Paul is saying, and using strong terminology, saying that they are bewitched. And what if we read Galatians chapter 2? And like that's why I said, that's why I went over Galatians 1, Galatians 2, and Galatians 3. Galatians 1, let's start off in Galatians 1. Galatians 1, chapter 1, verse 6, talks about people turning to a different gospel, not a physical gospel, but turning to a different message of Christ. And then he says in Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, the famous verse that everyone uses, if we or an angel from heaven preach a gospel contrary to the one that we preach to you, let him be accursed. Let him be accursed. And then in Galatians chapter 1, verse 11 and 12, he's using salesman tactics right here. He's saying, I swear, the gospel that has been preached to me is not of man origin. It did not come from man, but has come from the divine, or come from Jesus, right? What he says in Galatians chapter 1, verse 11 and 12. And then in Galatians chapter 1, verse 20, he says, "And when I'm writing to you, I swear I do not lie," right? So we already see that there's contentions, that there's frictions here. And these frictions are only going to escalate. When Galatians chapter 2, he's talking about people who are keeping up the works of the law, right? We know there's people keeping up the works of the law. Why were they keeping up the works of the law? Because either they didn't believe in a soteriological interpretation of the cross, or either they didn't believe in the crucifixion itself. They didn't believe they didn't believe Jesus died, and they didn't believe, and what we know damn well that these early Christians did not believe in Pauline's this Paul verse from the Jewish Christian side, from James's congregation. We know they did not believe that the Christ redeemed us from the curse of law by becoming a curse for us. Curses everyone is hung on a pole. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, where he's trying to hammer home the statement and trying to say, hey, Jesus was hammered to the cross, and so was the law hammered to the cross, and now anyone who rejects this, they're bewitched. So we can see two ways of interpreting this. Either you can say that they undermined or downplayed. You can say it like this: they either undermined, downplayed, or completely outright rejected the crucifixion. I think it's very clear that him using the strong terminology, and from the congregations that come later on from the Jewish Christians denying Jesus' death, that we can say, yes, it's very plausible that these people denied the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And this is what NIV Faith Study Bible says. Right here, NIV Faith Study Bible, I'm going to read, Jesus other than the one that we preach.
We watched the debate, so I
could just read this. I could just read this so I can show you, like, my interpretation isn't just coming out of my behind, but it's actually a valid interpretation that scholars bring. This is the NIV Faith Study Bible.
Not a reliable source for like
for who?
I like it's not a scholarly source, so I don't really care.
Is
But
there
notice
scholars who worked on NIV Faith Study Bible, or did it just drop down from the heavens?
I'm sorry. Is this a question or is this a interrogation? What's going on here?
He's saying he's
going to reject my source.
So this year, I think your question's been answered satisfactorily. You can go back down to the audience. I think next question is for Blessed. I think Abda, did you have a question, or did someone else have a question for Blessed?
Go ahead. I think Abda might.
Yeah. Then after that,
yes,
we'll do.
Yes, I have a question. Hello, Bless.
Walaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. So, Bless, I just wanted to further on Abdulaziz's point about like the crucifixion and the dying, saving man God idea being some kind of pagan idea that was introduced to Jewish people, right? And I wanted to talk about one of those ideas being acceptable of eating idol meat, and also if you would allow this extra, because I'm really giving you questions. People at the time of Jesus seeing him say, "Eat my flesh," just like Dionysius says, "Eat my flesh" as well, right? Eating raw bull, and that is in 2 Maccabees 6:7. It talks about that, and it name drops Dionysius, and the Jews were being forced. So people at that time actually apostated because they heard him talk about eating his flesh, feeding on him. His flesh is real food. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like Paul introducing idol meat, right? And that would be something like that would be connected to the crucifixion, as the crucifixion, the dying saving man God is an idea.
How's that? Because again,
I'm just
mentioned this is historical. We're talking about the guy was crucified, named Jesus from Nazareth, was a small group of Christians. We're not talking about anything of theological implications here in this debate.
This idea of the crucifixion, dying saving man God, basically Abdulazeez was pointing out that this is an invention by Paul, right? He's trying to assert that, right? And I wanted to further on that, and Paul is very familiar with pagan poets, as
I'm
you all
sorry,
know, right?
friend, but you're not bringing anything up with the crucifixion.
Okay.
Bring up some of the crucifixion. This is a conversation
the crucifixion is invented by Paul. This is an assertion.
Right. Like you're bringing up something about theological. I don't know why you and Abdulazeez and others are wrapped up in the theological.
So you're not going to defend or try to debunk the idea that the crucifixion is invented by Paul.
That's the historical hypothesis. That was the debate.
You're not going to defend it. You're not going to defend the idea that the crucifixion. I'm giving you evidence why it is, and you're not going to debunk it. None of that.
No,
I got to deal with it.
You're not dealing with the crucifixion. You're talking about something to do with Paul and having to do when it comes to eating the body and the flesh, which is obviously like an early Christian ideal. But that would just something being component on top of a crucifixion. We're talking about the event itself.
No, I can. Okay.
Those are two different things.
Okay, so basically, Paul is introducing pagan ideas to Jewish people. One of them is crucifixion. I'm giving more evidence to show that he introduced even more. And I'll even
wait. Are you arguing that Paul introduced these ideas to show Jesus' crucifixion?
I'm trying to show that this is one of the ideas that he introduced, as he introduced many ideas, like eating idol meat, right? It's acceptable to eat other people's gods' idol meat. This is not acceptable in Judaism, but it's acceptable in polytheism, right? He says it's your liberty if you're strong in faith in 1 Corinthians 8:7-9, right? This is an idea that he's introducing, right? And I'll give you one more, right?
What does this have to do with the crucifixion?
Okay, the dying saving man God, the crucifixion. You cannot have the dying saving man God without the crucifixion.
God doesn't matter. What do you want? Dying saving man does not matter. Man saving none of that matters.
Okay,
we're talking about was a man named Jesus crucified in the year during the reign of Tiberius, under Pontius Pilate, under the reign of Emperor Tiberius. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, can you have the dying saving man God without the crucifixion?
It does nothing to do, buddy. What are you not understanding?
Can you not? I'm asking you a question.
Did that happen?
About the
begs the question, what do you mean by...
That's what I'm talking about, the evidence regarding that.
Any theological are dealing with fundamental realities and you pose a question, you have to understand that the reality of the concepts of your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable about as...
Yes, as historical evidence.
Crucifixion? As soul evidence? No, not soul.
No, I say soul. Do you use them as evidence?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm attacking Paul. I'm showing he's introducing many pagan ideas, and then the crucifixion, him being the earliest, is also pagan. One of the pagan ideas, because you do not have the crucifixion without the dying saving man.
But
Yeah,
I
you cannot have the dying
earlier,
saving man without the crucifixion.
No, because if you were here earlier in my debate, you would understand that I said that like Paul can contradict or err. The Gospels can contradict or err on things. They can get things wrong. They can embellish events. It doesn't mean, therefore, you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I'm not talking about embellishing events.
Yes, you are. You're talking about, does a dying and rising saving man have to do with the crucifixion according to Paul and his theology?
Paul didn't make a mistake.
Question.
No, Paul didn't make. I'm not saying Paul made a mistake.
And moderators, can we please, dear God, move on?
Okay, this one answer.
Yeah, so yeah, that's fine. So I think the point, I'm just going to get you to try and answer this.
Elifie, can you please?
Trying to say is that. Yeah, fine.
I apologize.
Can you please like try to get him the answer if you can? Okay.
So blessed. Yeah, so blessed. I think what he's trying to say is that Paul is like a Trojan horse that's carrying in paganism and influencing Christianity. And one of the things that is paganistic that he's using to influence Christianity is this idea of a vicarious man, God, savior, atoning for the sins of the world. And he'd like you to comment on that in terms of its historical reliability.
You would agree that that conversation has nothing to do with Jesus' crucifixion.
No, it does. Because
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
It does.
No,
it does.
No, it doesn't. No, stop. Because all you brought up was what the crucifixion entails towards the Christians. The crucifixion entails atonement, entails sacrifice for sins. That's how the Christians viewed it.
So it does have to do with the crucifixion?
No, it doesn't tell us historically if this guy died on the cross or not. It's theological implications built off the event.
No, it actually
it's a different conversation. How can? Come on.
Blessed. Do you want me to
all right.
same conversation?
All right, real quick. Yeah. But before we continue, can Squiddy be unmuted?
Yeah, no problem. But I'm going to explain to you how what's it called? It's the same like part of the same topic, right? Because Paul is one of your earliest sources regarding the crucifixion. He's earlier than Mark, and Mark is influenced by Paul, according to a lot of scholars. So if Paul is theologically driven by paganism, or he's being a Trojan horse for pagan ideals, which is what Brother Abdul is trying to explain to you, then obviously that's going to have an implication on the historical reliability of Paul in the first place, and by extension, the historical reliability of the Gospels.
Nope.
What do you mean?
No, it does not. No. It is
not.
I'll add one thing, Leafy. If you can answer this one question, then I'll leave, right?
No,
can you have the science?
It's a theological composition to the event of a crucifixion. That's all
I'll leave you alone. Just answer this one question. Can you have the dying and saving man God, right? Can you have that without the crucifixion? Without someone dying on a cross for someone's sins? Can you have that?
Oh, without a crucifixion? Sure, because somebody could die in a pit.
Okay, I'm not asking someone dying for
someone's
sins.
You just asked me a question.
Doesn't matter about the cross.
A dying and rising man God, if that is in conflict with the particular Roman procedure of crucifixion, then they're not.
The act of death. I'm saying the act of death. Someone dying for someone else's sins.
Well, of course, the act of death is compiled for a resurrection. But we're not talking about
so you cannot have it, right?
Squiddy, can you see this BS going on?
This one answer.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, I'll leave. He doesn't want to answer my question.
I don't think
it's not that. No, I can answer it. All it is you're asking theological implications based off a historical event. In the historical event, we're debating. Yes, you're asking a dying. Yes, you are.
I didn't ask that. I said, can you have that?
Bless, I just explained to you how it relates to the historical reliability of
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
No, I just showed you it doesn't.
Blessed,
I just showed you it does not.
Yeah, and I just showed you that it does, right? So let's skip this question because clearly you don't want to answer, or you think you've answered it satisfactorily. So let's go to someone else. So the other question.
This is gonna be
you guys bring up Hazard.
Okay, Bless. That's not.
And he can mute me because he doesn't like my answer.
No. You gave your answer. I let you give your answer. I'm muting you because you're still on the same point. You're on the same point, bro. You're not on a different point, right? So I'm just saying, let's move to a different. Bro. That's it.
Okay, stop.
Now we're going to a different point.
No one cares for your little manicure, bro.
Yeah, this is kind of. I mean, look. If you don't want Blessed to flip you off, don't mute him. Like this is kind of.
It doesn't matter. We're going in circles. Hazard. Are we bring up Hazard? Are we bring up Hazard? Does Hazard want to get?
No.
Unmute Blessed. Unmute Blessed. This is ridiculous. Unmute him.
Bro, the debate is basically over.
You're muted. Kesko, this is the last question. Go ahead and ask Abdulazeez.
Bro, one of my favorite.
You guys, there's no way you should be flipping each other off and arguing like this. Like, you guys are all grown men. Come on. And after this, we will be moving to public chat. So ask your last question, please, and let's move on.
Hey, Kasuko. How you been?
Hello to everyone, right? Everyone in this event. I have a question to you, Abdulazeez. I hope I said it right. Obviously, when it comes to the Quran, right? In chapter 4, Anisa, ayat 157, you have the famous, verse right here, right, where it says, and for their saying, indeed, we have a question. They killed the Messiah, Jesus, the Son of Mary, the messenger of Allah. They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but another was made to resemble him to them. And indeed, those who differ over it are in doubt of it. They have no knowledge except following assumption. They do not come for certain. Obviously, we have that. My question is, one, obviously, because this is Muhammad revealing to his audience, right, that this is what happened, right, because this is divine, because he's revealing it to the people in Arabia. This was the divine revelation, right? So he's revealing it to that, this surah, this ayat, right? So if that follows, right, if that's the case, how do we see when we read this verse? Because right there, what after what it says, they did not crucify him, they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but another was made to resemble them. And then this is the key passage right here, key statement. And indeed, those who differ over it are in doubt, and they have no knowledge of it except the following assumption.
Okay, bro.
How do they have the following assumption? I.e., how do they have the following assumption about about Jesus not actually dying on the cross if this was revealed only to Muhammad's time during this 700, in the 6th century? How do they have knowledge of the assumption when it was only revealed, it was only known to Allah, right? Because even in Al-Jalad, Ibn Kathir, this was only known to, this wasn't even like, this was only known to the Allah.
Yeah, so are you saying like the Mufassirin they take from like the Israeliyat? Are you basically making that point? That some of the like Mufassirin, the people who do tafsir on the Quran, they might have taken from other oral traditions or other beliefs pertaining to early Christians? Is that your claim, or are you saying like
No, not that.
Then why'd you mention Ibn Kathir and Jalalain?
Why? Because we're here and they mentioned, at least this is what they said, right? They're throughout their writings that at least Al-Jalan, I hope I said it right.
Al-Jalalain, I think.
Yeah, because when he's commenting on this, like on this verse, where like it was made to appear so to them, meaning that someone else was made to resemble him, and they killed that person instead, while thinking it was Jesus. Obviously, I understand there's multiple theories.
There's multiple interpretations.
But like right here after he says this matter was known only to Allah, revealed in the Quran. So if that just begs the question for me, right? How do they know what Allah's knowledge have, even though it was revealed during the 6th century, but somehow they have knowledge of the following assumption if it was revealed to them? Meaning somehow these people, these groups, right? All the people you're quoting, they have knowledge of the following assumption, like Ignatius. They have knowledge of what was revealed only to Allah. That's why in that verse in the Quran it says, right, they have no knowledge of it except the following assumption. They did not kill him for certain.
So wait, let me understand his question. He's saying that Allah is saying in the Quran that they only follow conjecture, but yet you're quoting Irenaeus and Ignatius, and they're like somewhat certain in their beliefs of what happened. Is that your point?
Yeah. So
So Abdulazeez, I think we understood your point. Abdulazeez, you can answer.
So, Kasuko, I'd like to see like the tafsir from Jalalain as well, but I can read you tafsir Ibn Kathir. He says, and remember when Allah said, "O Isa, I will take you up and raise you to myself." When Isa ascended, those who were in the house came out. When those surrounding the house saw the man who looked like Isa, they thought that he was Isa. So they took him at night, crucified him, and placed the crown of thorns on his head. The Jews then boasted, saying that they killed Isa, and some Christians accepted their false claim due to their ignorance and lack of reason. When the Quran is speaking of the people historically, he's saying they don't have knowledge regarding to the people who are claiming, the ones who are boasting, saying we killed the Messiah, we crucified him, right? And then Allah refutes them and says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا سَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُم, right? وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا سَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُم. So Allah is refuting them, and he's saying that these people who are going around claiming that Jesus was crucified, they have no knowledge whatsoever. They have no ilm. They're following them. They're following conjecture. They're following hearsay. They're following the Jews who were going around boasting. Remember, we have to understand the subject of this claim is from the Jews who were boasting, saying saying that the Messiah was killed and the Messiah was crucified, right? So when it comes to like what Ibn Kathir says, word for word, some Christians accepted their false claim due to the ignorance and lack of reason. As for those who were in the house with Isa, they witnessed his ascension to heavens. So even Ibn Kathir agrees with me that like this isn't like this is an overall like this is a general statement and not to be taken entirely pertaining to all of Jesus and his followers. This is basically it's clearly being attributed to the Jews because this statement is attributed and made by the Jews in chapter 4 verse 157 where Allah is refuting them when they says the Jews were boasting this, right? So when it comes to the people who are claiming that Jesus was crucified and he was killed, they have no knowledge regarding the events that Jesus and his followers, his first-hand followers, they would have knew what happened to Jesus. This is why they went on preaching their views on Jesus, and this is why we get basically the viewpoint in the first century who Ignatius is dealing with, and the conjecture within Paul's congregation that people were downplaying, undermining, and outright rejecting the crucifixion, the death of Jesus, so on and so forth. Right. So it just depends on what tafsir you appeal to, but I would like to analyze Jalalain's tafsir, but they have no knowledge whatsoever. This is pertaining to the people who are claiming that he died, he was killed. It's very clear from the verse.
Oh. So basically, oh yeah, I did get a mistake. Obviously it was to the Jews, but like when the knowledge of obviously Ignatius, he writes, whether it's Josephus because of the phrases, whatever. So you're saying it's just basically the Jews right here, the ones that are laughing.
Yes, so the people I can make you like I can give you another parallel example. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like hypothetically like if refuted like the people who tried killing Abraham, the people they threw him in the fire, they thought he killed, they thought he died. He appeared to have suffered in front of them, right? But we know Ibrahim alayhi salam, we know he was saved. We know that Allah made the fire cool and Ibrahim alayhi salam, Abraham was able to escape, right? So Abraham and his immediate followers would have known that he escaped from this, but the people who were laughing, the people who were boasting, the people who threw him in the fire because he destroyed their idols, they would have had no knowledge regarding what happened to Abraham, right? So same thing.
All right. I'll have to look more into it. But
you should read the Tafsir ibn Kathir. Tafsir ibn Kathir, chapter 4, verse 157. I think like you can just go to Quran.com and go to the abridged version. Every single point that I made, I'll put it in the side chat if you'd like as well. The Tafsir where he says,
I think
Jesus' immediate followers would have known that he was ascended into the heavens.
Yeah, so I think that concludes like the question that you asked and concludes this event. Esther?
Yeah, thank you.
Hazard had a question. I don't know if you guys want to bring him up, but
yeah, he can go and ask it when we say that it's ending. Like that means that it's ending, right?
Where's his little hand raised?
Anyways, so Hazard can go ask his question in the discussion VC. I put it in side chat. Every single person can go there. I will move you in 2 seconds if you guys want to be lazy and don't want to move. So yeah.
Okay, so the grand guy said there's no evidence of the crucifixion. That was like the Paul and the Ignatius letters, the trail lines, and then
stop gobbling up and bless the wiener, bro.
Yeah. Bro, like, shut the hell up, Squiddy. Damn.
What are you doing?
He just did. No, all he did was Abdulazeez.
Little fanboy, bro. Look at this fanboy shit.
Okay, yeah, you're gone.
Yeah, he's just upset that he lost his debate.
No, can somebody remove him too? I can't even remove him.
No, Khalito, real quick, before you remove me, I like to say, Khalito? I love, what's your proper name? Just make sure.
Huh? You can.
He's asking what's your proper name. Like, just leave them. All right, thank you guys for attending this. Yeah, thank you guys for attending this debate. Take care of yourselves.
Wait, don't. Okay. Well, I guess I'm the only one here. You guys, please go to the one in the side chat. Go to VC in side chat while I move half of you. Please don't be lazy, you guys, because I haven't even logged into my PC yet.
All right, ask me for sources. Yeah, come on. Ask me for sources. I'll bring the sources. Or you can go to my TikTok or my YouTube.
Go to side chat. Abdulazeez, why did you have to do that?
Yeah, well, it's a glitch.
No, your language isn't a glitch. Stop coming up here and go to there.
Squiddy is gobbling and hootering and hollering like, bro, like I'm gonna call it out for what it is. And like, bro, we have a guy like with nail polish who I debated. What the hell? That people said I was scared of.
This is why you're going to. SJ is now the queen of the hill.
Yeah, so we're just gonna disconnect SJ and okay. If anyone wants sources for anything that I said within the debate, come ask me about it. Hit me up in my DMs. Hazard, go to discussion. Hazard, I'll cook you on any single point that you want. You dimwit.
No,
okay, go to discussion VC.
Don't like. Come on, we actually have kids here trying to learn, and unless you're
yeah. So someone glitched you like out of the VC.
Bruh.
Okay, let's go to discussion.
Move to. Are you gonna help me move these people?